Recording in progress.
Okay, well, welcome everybody to the 2025 annual meeting of the Mammal Commission. We're just checking to see that we're online. Okay, well, welcome again for those of you online who were delayed. So I'm Frances Gulland, I'm chair of the Mammal Commission, and I am here in person with my fellow commissioner Sue Moore in the front row, and then Andy Reid, our third commissioner, was unable to be here, but he is online in North Carolina. So the three of us welcome you here to the Commission's meeting, and we are really lucky to be in Scripps Oceanography Institute here in beautiful La Jolla. And so before we start, we're going to have a few welcome remarks from Jack Gilbert, who is the Deputy Director of Research here. And you may notice that we sort of talk in the same way. So they had to import some Brits to help us through this meeting. So we're both proud to be here and to host you in our adopted home in California. Welcome, Jack.
I think we're British American now. Is that the phraseology we're allowed?
We are citizens.
Citizens, British American citizens.
And we
Remember that.
And we is the royal we.
Okay. Exactly. One is a citizen. Okay, yeah, so thank you very much. My name is Jack Gilbert. I'm the Associate Vice Chancellor for Marine Science here at the University of California, San Diego, and also the Deputy Director of Scripps Institution of Oceanography. Scripps Institution of Oceanography is a very old organisation. We started in 1902, old even for British people. We started in 1902 and have always had a mission to drive forward science and communication for the public good and for the good of America. So, it's an honour to welcome you all here to our Seaside Forum, which is a beautiful building, which we're still paying off, for the 2025 Marine Mammal Commission annual meeting. At Scripps, our mission is to understand and protect the planet through science, education, and engagement. Few topics capture the public's imagination and our responsibility for the Earth more powerfully than marine mammals. They are sentinels of ecosystem health, symbols of ocean stewardship, and reminders of the deep interconnectedness between people and the sea. The Marine Mammal Commission plays a unique role and a vital role in safeguarding these animals and their ecosystems. As the only US government body charged with comprehensive oversight of all science, policy, and management actions affecting marine mammals, your work ensures that the conservation is rooted in rigorous science and management decisions and accountability to the highest standards of evidence. That role has never been more critical, as marine mammals face increasing pressures from climate change, shifting ecosystems, pollution, noise, ship traffic, and other human activities. But here at Scripps, we share that commitment for long-term science and stewardship. From our earliest work with the California Cooperative Oceanic Fisheries Investigations, to ongoing studies on ocean acoustics, toxic contamination, and climate impacts, our researchers and students have built programs that directly inform the conservation and management of marine mammal systems. I'm very glad to see the involvement of our very own Caitlin Fraser and Aaron Thode. Dr. Fraser brings a wealth of experience in passive acoustic monitoring, marine mammal biology, and the computational methods in ocean soundscape analysis. And Dr. Thode is a leading expert in marine mammal acoustics, advanced acoustic signal processing, and geoacoustic imaging, inversion, and tomography. The involvement of our faculty in an annual meeting of this calibre is evidence of the deep ties that we have to the Commission's goals. And we are proud to continue collaborating with the Commission, federal agencies, and international partners to ensure these extraordinary species can thrive as integral parts of healthy marine systems. I want to thank the Commission for choosing Scripps as the host for this year's meeting and to acknowledge the dedication of the Commissioners, staff and technical advisors who carry this mission forward. Your efforts to protect marine mammal populations, but also safeguard the resiliency of all oceans that sustain us, is admirable. On behalf of Scripps Institution of Oceanography, and UC San Diego, I wish you a productive and inspirational meeting, and we are honoured to host you and support this vital work. Thank you. And now, coming up. He's not English, but he'll do.
Take care. Thank you, Jack. I'm Peter Thomas, Executive Director of the Marine Mammal Commission. I'm thrilled to welcome my 3 commissioners, my Committee of Scientific Advisors, including the chair, Dr. Randy Reeves, and my scientific advisors are arrayed in front of us, and our staff. And want to just in advance really thank our staff for pulling together what proves to be an exciting meeting. So the Marine Mammal Commission has a long history of annual meetings held around the United States since the mid-1970s. Our most recent annual meeting was in Washington, D.C. in 2023 and was paired with a symposium hosted by the National Marine Fisheries Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Smithsonian on whales on the brink. In 2024, we held a working meeting of the Commission to talk about many of the issues of stock assessment, which we'll talk about today. As we open the meeting, I want to dedicate it to Dr. Mike Tillman and Dr. Bob Hoffman. Mike Tillman passed away in July 24, and he was our commissioner from 2010 to 2022. During that time, he led work in the International Whaling Commission on Aboriginal subsistence whaling, and he brought his entire career of experience with National Marine Fisheries Service to our work at the Commission. Bob Hoffman was the scientific program director from the first days of the Commission until 2000, and he built the Commission's legacy of scientific exploration and excellence. And we'll see some examples of the kinds of work that he led throughout those 25 years of his career. And we strive every day to meet the bar that Mike and Bob have set for us, and it's actually incredibly difficult. I also want to, since we're here in La Jolla and some of these passings are so recent, I want to talk about Dr. Armando Jaramillo Legarreta, who was the lead on all things acoustics for the program to try to rescue the vaquita in Baja California, Mexico. He was just really the core and spirit of the vaquita team. I also want to honor the recent passing of Jim Estes. Jim was hired in 1974 by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, beginning a decades-long career with the Department of Interior. As a federal scientist, Jim Estes' groundbreaking work on the sea otter showed just how much these iconic marine mammals could and continue to teach us about how the world's ecosystems work. And finally, again, a very recent passing, Buddy Powell was a pioneer in manatee research and conservation, whose work led to protected spaces for manatees in Florida, Africa, and South America for over 50 years. And all 3 of these people were dear colleagues of many of us in the room. I'll also, from the federal side, note the passing, and I forgot his name, Mike Young, who was a solicitor in the Department of Interior, who worked on IWC issues, worked on ESA listings such as of the polar bear, and also was really the lead solicitor for many of the international trade issues facing the wildlife community. So briefly, I just want to talk about the Marine Mammal Commission, and thank you for the introduction, Jack. The Marine Mammal Commission is an independent, science-based oversight agency of the federal government. We're charged by the Marine Mammal Protection Act to further the goals and responsibilities of the Act. Our structure is interesting. Much of our structure is here in the room today. We have 3 presidentially appointed and Senate-confirmed commissioners. We have our Committee of Scientific Advisors. We have Vera Metcalf, our Alaska Native advisor, and a small staff currently of 11 people plus myself. And we also have 1 Canal Sea Grant Fellow. And as part of an ongoing, we've probably had over a dozen Sea Grant Fellows over as many years. So our work, to characterize our work, I'll just give a short history of some of the more technology and innovative related things that we've pushed over the last now 50 years. It's not exhaustive, I've just cherry-picked a few examples. Starting in 1975, we held a workshop to identify new research that might contribute to the solution of the tuna porpoise problem, which was one of the issues that drove the Congress to pass the Marine Mammal Protection Act. It was followed by a report in 1981, led by Bob Hoffman, on possible alternative methods for catching yellowfin tuna other than purse seines. Going to Florida, we held a workshop on geographic information systems, were just emerging at that time in 1990, on how to manage the habitat for West Indian manatees in Florida and Georgia. In 1996, we held a workshop and produced a report on acoustic deterrence of harmful marine mammal fishery interactions. In 2005, the Commission supported a National Academy of Science study, assessment of cumulative effects of anthropogenic stressors on marine mammals. And in 2011, in partnership with the Office of Naval Research, we funded a symposium on population consequences of acoustic disturbances on marine mammals. Going to the East Coast a little bit, we funded, no, that's not the East Coast, I blew that. Unmanned National Marine Mammal Lab, we funded an unmanned aerial survey systems for surveying marine mammals workshop and a whole series of studies, which led to a report which was later authored by the Marine Mammal Commission, and a more recent workshop on marine mammal health surveillance led by Lori Schwacke, our scientific lead. We also have a grants program, which has been active again for the whole 50 years, but I'll start in 2013 with a grant to support the expansion of the prototype whale alert app on the East Coast in 2013. These apps were brand new at that point, and this really jump-started an app which is now, I assume it's on everybody's phone in this room. It covers the Atlantic, it covers Pacific, it's moving up into Alaska. Similarly, in 2016, we supported a sail drone Bering Sea mission. Again, sail drones in 2016 were this cool concept. You put a sail on a windsurfer and send it off into the unknown. Well, this first sail drone went up through the Bering Straits, up into the Arctic, and now, if you look around the world, sail drones are all over the place doing oceanographic research, monitoring offshore activities. They're all over the place. So we're really thrilled to have been in on the very ground floor of the sail drone. Similarly, in 2016, we gave a grant to Tim Werner at the New England Aquarium for the first development in the lobster fishery of ropeless or on-demand fishing technology for the United States. And as many of you are well familiar, that work to develop that kind of technology is a major task right now. And also today, we've got a couple people in the room who are going to talk to us about whales from space. And in 2021, we provided a grant to keep that work going as it was getting started. So the Commission also, as I've said, we still administer a small grants program. And in 2025, we requested project proposals focused on the development of new tools, technologies, or methods to improve marine mammal stock assessments. And the funded projects include 2 that either advance new application of satellite-based technology for detection of cetaceans, 3 that use unmanned aerial systems for assessing either abundance or serious injury of marine mammals, and 2 that advance quantitative methods for assessing population abundance, one using spatial marker capture and one that explores the feasibility of applying genetic or close kin mark recapture. So to figure this stuff out, to look at more about this, we have the obligatory barcode so you can subscribe to our newsletter. And then just to very briefly introduce this, I'm not really the one who ought to be doing it, Lori ought to be doing it, but to introduce the concept of marine mammal stock assessment reports. Section 117 of the MMPA really gives the stock assessments, give us valuable information on current population status, abundance, population trends, productivity rates, estimates of human cause mortality, and other sources of serious injury, and more. These allow the federal agencies to evaluate the potential biological removal levels, effectiveness of conservation and recovery measures, and to adjust management approaches as needed. And NMFS and Fish and Wildlife Service are global leaders in assessing marine mammal stocks. And the topic of our annual meeting, emerging technologies to support stock assessments and increase the effectiveness and efficiency of assessment efforts, has been a research priority for NMFS, Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Commission for many years. There is concern that current budget and staff reductions with departure of experienced personnel may slow the project progress that's being made with the research and testing of new technologies. And we hope this meeting will inform us on the current technologies, what they eventually may or may not be able to help us do, and help us identify research needs or data gaps that offer the best opportunities for continuing the progress that's been made to date. Let's see. Oh, this is the meeting title. I got a little stumped there. So as we move into the meeting, I really again wanted to thank Lori Schwacke, the Scientific Program Director, for leading our agenda development, and the staff leads for each session for identifying the issues, possible speakers, and pulling the sessions together. We hope to exchange information across the agencies and the public about cutting-edge technological advancements, and collect information to help the Commission in formulating future recommendations to other federal agencies related to stock assessments and potentially other science, policy, and management issues. We hope that everybody will be here to facilitate the discussion, ask a lot of questions between ourselves, and again, help us as we come out of the meeting identify next steps. And just a brief, you've got the agenda either online or on paper. Today we'll be focused on eyes in the sky, emerging technologies for remote detection and assessment. Tomorrow we'll have two sessions, one on reducing impact through innovation, so innovative and less invasive sampling methods for health and population assessment, and then connecting the dots. Really, we got all this information, what are we going to do with it? Innovative and integrated quantitative methods for assessing populations. And on day 3, we'll have some regional updates from here in the California current ecosystem. So getting to the final 2 slides, housekeeping. We're in a beautiful venue. Keep the lids on your coffee cups. There are trash cans located around the room. The restrooms are back there for those of us in the room. And the emergency exits as well. Microphones, I think as we start the sessions. Brady, do you want to say a word on microphones?
Yeah, test. Okay. I just wanted to communicate for those in the room, you will use the microphone in front of you, push to turn on the microphone, and then push to turn it off when you're done speaking. For those who are attending virtually, please use the chat to speak with meeting hosts like myself for technical difficulties, and then use the meeting Q&A to submit questions for panel discussions that will, prompt the moderator when available. And I think that is all for now.
Thank you, Brady. Okay. And finally, just to be clear, this is a public meeting, and under applicable law, the Commission is required to maintain and provide a public record of the proceedings. As such, the meeting will be recorded and will be posted sometime after the meeting on the Marine Mammal Commission website. And that is where I stop, and I turn it over to the first session, which will be chaired by Dr. Jason Baker, one of the members of our Committee of Scientific Advisors. So as we do this, patience while we do the switch, and thanks a lot.
Thanks, Peter. slideshow, close out that, and then we'll open session intro slides,
Second slide. There we go.
and we'll go to slideshow. I did the first slide, you might have to go and click next.
Oh, okay. Yeah. There we go. Good afternoon, everyone, in the room and online. I'm delighted to moderate the first of our sessions for this meeting. The format is we're going to hear from 5 speakers on the topic of satellite detection of marine mammals, that general topic. We'll have a break, and then we'll have a panel discussion with those speakers, and also Dave Johnson, who will be joining for the panel. So you can tell from the agenda that our focus on this session is on satellite detection of marine mammals. When we started to plan this session, we were kind of thinking about kind of a more open-ended, broad discussion of novel emerging technologies for detecting and assessing marine mammals. And we thought about including all sorts of things like emerging acoustic technology and equipment, unmanned aerial systems, gliders in the ocean, as well as satellites. In the end, we realized we would not be able, with the time that we had, to do justice to any one of those topics, or to any of those topics if we included all of them. So we decided to more narrowly focus on this satellite technology. And for me, one of the interesting things about this, and why it's good to focus on it, is that this idea of detecting marine mammals from satellite imagery is not new. It's been around, at least I know of, for 25 years. And there has been some really great work done, proof of concept projects that have been published, also publications on methods, and even a few examples of actually estimating abundance just from satellite imagery. But really, this technology has not graduated to the step or the level where it's really integrated into any marine mammal assessment programs as an ongoing thing. It hasn't kind of made that jump. And that's true, I would say, for all of the other kinds of technologies. The acoustics and the UASs have become integrated into various programs. And so why is that? We're going to hear a lot about that. We're going to hear a lot about the opportunities and the great advancements that are potentially available through satellite technology. But there's some really, really hard problems to solve, and some of our speakers are going to be talking about that. And if any of the speakers or anyone else knows that I'm wrong about this idea that it actually hasn't been integrated into programs, please let me know. I'd be excited to hear about that. So without further ado, we will jump into our first presentation, which will be from Kristen Kahn, and then she's going to be followed by Kim Getz. And I'm going to open that. I think I'm going to open that. Okay, I'm already lost, Brady. Where's the...
If you scroll to the bottom with your mouse, you should be able to see
the...
it hides.
Okay. This one, right?
It should be open. And then this is this one.
Sorry about that. I'm a Mac person. There we go. Take it away, Kristen.
Just hide this from you because it's distracting.
Hey everybody, I'm really excited to be here with you all today discussing one of my favorite topics. My name is Kristen Kahn. I'm a biologist at NOAA's Northeast Fisheries Science Center in Woods Hole. And together with my colleagues, including Kim Getz, who will speak after me, we're excited to introduce you to the Geospatial Artificial Intelligence for Animals project, better known as Gaia. Success on the third try. So Gaia is a collaborative, multi-institutional initiative that's led by NOAA Fisheries with support from Microsoft AI for Good. Our partners include the Naval Research Laboratory, the U.S. Geological Survey, the Polar Geospatial Center, Maxar Technologies, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, the British Antarctic Survey, the National Reconnaissance Office, the Civil Applications Committee, and others. This is really a topic that takes a village, or possibly a global community of folks interested in detecting whales from satellite imagery. So we try really hard to keep the lines of communication and collaboration open with everyone. So as Peter, I think it was Peter mentioned, the first whale was identified in satellite imagery back in 2002 using 1 meter resolution sensors, which was a major breakthrough at the time. And since then, as you know, satellite resolution and coverage has really dramatically improved, leading to a surge of interest and studies confirming the feasibility of using this technology to detect whales from space. However, studies to date have really all relied on a very limited number of images under really ideal conditions, typically really calm seas, clear skies, and single species habitats. And while this proof of concept has been really an important first step, we still have a lot of unanswered questions about how well satellite imagery will perform under more dynamic real-world conditions. And so to move towards an operational monitoring system, we really need to scale beyond this manual image review, which is very slow and labor-intensive. Thanks to advances in sensor resolution, cloud computing, and AI, automated detection is really within reach, but it hinges on one essential input, which is a reliable annotated training data set. So this is exactly what Gaia is working to develop, a next generation system for training and validating machine learning models to detect whales from satellite imagery. And we've been actively acquiring large volumes of imagery over a variety of species and regions of interest since about 2021. Shown here is just a snapshot of our 2025 taskings focused exclusively on the North Atlantic right whale. Just one example of how we're expanding capacity. We're also collecting over other species as well. So we recently launched the Gaia cloud-based annotation tool, which allows subject matter experts to review and label pre-processed imagery, even without remote sensing experience. It supports a triple blind review, final validation, brightness and contrast enhancements, and it stores the annotations in a structured spatial light database. Pictured here is actually the Center for Coastal Studies aerial survey plane, mid-right whale aerial survey flight. Our end-to-end workflow begins with satellite imagery tasking over known whale hotspots. Imagery is then downloaded via the Earth Explorer API, pre-processed, converted into cloud-optimized geotiffs, and scanned for points of interest. These points are then served up for experts for annotation. And with the system now operational, we're really ready to begin building those training data sets. Our first case study focuses on Cape Cod Bay using imagery collected between 2021 and 2024. This area is really ideal for validation thanks to overlapping aerial survey data from the Center for Coastal Studies, which will help us to validate and ground truth our detection results. And we're also laying the foundation to scale this approach. We're building a flexible system that can support multiple annotation projects across different regions and different species, expanding to new use cases as science needs evolve. These are the first 6 priority projects, one from each of the NOAA Science Centers. At the Northeast Center, my focus is on North Atlantic right whales. Kim Getz at the Alaska Center focuses on the Cook Inlet beluga whale. And then we're also focusing on the southern resident killer whale, blue and humpback whales, Hawaiian monk seals, and sea turtles, just because we didn't already have enough challenges. and the elusive Rice's whale. So beyond the multi-project support, we're incorporating additional features like grid-based searching to review the full image, options to annotate a single point or in batch, validation of labeled animal detections, review of duplicates, and CSV export of results. So I'll briefly walk you through each of these features. This is the main tool where scientists focus most of their effort, looking at the object in the center of the image. The gray dotted circle indicates the search area and can be turned on or off. You can zoom in and out, adjust brightness and contrast, make comments if the object is of interest. And once you're ready to label the object, you simply click one of these blue label buttons, and then it seamlessly advances to show you the next point of interest. In cases where your point of interest actually turns out to be an animal, you instead select the button on the upper right that says Animal at the top there. And then doing so will open up this other menu of options where you can select a species and assign a confidence level. There's another cool feature that we just recently implemented where there may be several false positives triggered by a vessel wake, for example. And in this case, you can click on the link to the left side of the screen to where it says View all points in this area. And then this link brings you to another tool, the Annotate Batch tool, which can also be accessed from the main landing page. And in this tool, you can see all of the points in an area. So in this example, you can see that there are several points being flagged by a vessel wake, and the search area button can be clicked on and off so that you can get the points out of your way and you can see what's going on underneath them. In this case, those points should all be classified as a vessel wake. So you can just click on each of the circles, which makes them all shaded the same color, yellow. And then you can just click on the vessel or wake category and simultaneously label all of those points. Once each point has been labeled by 3 different independent subject matter experts, any point that was classified by at least one person as an animal then gets sent for an additional final validation on this screen. From here, you can click on the ID number of the point on the left side, which then opens it up in the map view again. In this case, one annotator labeled the object as a right whale, one labeled it as an unknown whale, and one did not label it as an animal. So in this case, we review the detection again together and decide on a final result. We also plan to revisit these labeled images periodically as we start to refine our methods and establish protocols and standards, because a lot of us are still pretty new at looking at whales and satellite imagery. We've also built some logic to check for any confirmed annotations that fall within 100 meters of each other and serve them up for an additional round of quality check. For cases where we have several animals clustered together in close proximity, such as, for example, a right whale sag or a group of dolphins, we want to be able to be sure that each whale has its own point and one and only point per whale. For example, a recent image, we had a right whale head flagged as a point and the tail flagged as a point. So we just want to make sure that's in our database once. So far, it hasn't come up too many times, but we anticipate it to be more helpful in the future. And finally, we intend to be able to export our final results, either in the format recommended by Hannah Cubanes and Peter Fretwell in the BASS dataset publication, or in the format required for ingestion into the whale map interface. In either case, right now, export is metadata only, not the raw imagery due to licensing restrictions. We're still fine-tuning our data fields, but we should be able to export these CSV files to meet those standards shortly. Ultimately, all this work is really laying the groundwork to one day augment these protected species surveys, such as in this example, where we're collecting satellite imagery alongside ongoing bowhead abundance and distribution aerial surveys to be able to explore these complementary methods. And results from our ongoing analysis of imagery in Cape Cod Bay will shed some light on the potential benefits and limitations of this approach as compared to other survey methods. Thank you for your attention and interest. My presentation will be followed by Kim Getz, who will tell you more about Gaia's pre-process.
Kristen, what was the trick on? The mouse. Okay, just didn't, hopefully reduce it at least to 2 times or. So I'm Kim Getz. I'm the co-PI on the Gaia project along with Kristen. And like she said, we've been working with a ton of people to make all this stuff possible. And so I'm going to get a little bit into the nitty-gritty of what we're doing in terms of pre-processing satellite imagery. Okay, she lied to me. Let me see. Nope. Here. Yes. Okay. So we're using level 1B, which is basically, should not be doing that. What did I do now? Wait, here we go. It's gonna stay? Okay. We're using level 1B. I did not put a timer on this. Did somebody put a timer on this? Wait, hold on. I know, I could do that. They only gave me 10 minutes, so.
It's interesting that it just jumped into it.
I have no idea.
Hide this. All right, let's see. Display settings. This is surprising. Let's just end the slideshow and start
Skip, yeah,
from the top.
okay.
And hopefully, if we go to slideshow. Presenter
Oh, is
here.
that?
Use timings?
Yeah, don't do that. I don't know timing. I don't know who put that on.
Okay, let's try this.
Okay,
Theoretically.
okay, wait. Let's see. Stand here. So can I just wait for it?
Let's see if it stays.
I think so. Okay, I get extra minutes for that. So we're using the level 1B, which is the raw imagery essentially, and everybody kind of asks us like, why on earth would you want to do that? Because it's a lot of work. There is actually a reason we did not want to use the raw imagery, and I'm going to kind of go through and give you why we wanted to. We ended up going back to this. We did not initially do that. Most people use like standard 2A or even higher level satellite imagery, which I'll talk more about in a minute. Using the raw imagery, there's a lot of processing so that you want to be able to see that the animal is not only a whale, but you want to be able to see that it's the right species or identify the species. So what kind of led us down this path is actually working with Hannah and Penny. They had some annotated data sets already. So for example, one in Somerset Island, Canada of beluga whales. And so we asked, we're like, can we use your annotations just to check it out? And then, of course, because of license restrictions with satellite imagery, they couldn't share the image that they annotated. So they told us the product and the catalog ID, which in everybody's mind was like, that's all you need, and that should be great. So we got that image, and unfortunately, you can see the annotations, like in some parts of the image in the circle, it looks like it's right on the animal. Other parts of the image, it's shifted one direction. Other parts of the image yet, it's shifted another direction. And we're like, well, that's really weird. Like, this was a standard 2A image. It should align. We went, this is basically what sent us down this rabbit hole. So we talked to Maxar, we talked to a lot of people. Essentially, there's a few different things going on. It's when Maxar processes an image, when you request an image, they process it right there, essentially. And so as technology changes, they're changing how they process it, but there's no documentation anywhere that you can follow that says, well, what happened? Why is this different? So they got theirs many years ago, and I think this was like maybe a mosaic that they put together. It was different than what they got, so we're like, well, that's not that useful. If we want to create something transparent and going into the future, we want to share annotated data sets, so that was really important to us. So that was one of the reasons we decided to really stay with the 1Bs. So we wanted to really promote the transparency, the reproducibility, and collaboration, and also support the human-in-the-loop identification of marine mammals. So we want to have the best quality image that we can produce to have the best chance of seeing what species it is and that it's actually a whale. So that's essentially what we realized. Our lovely path looked a little bit something like this, what Kristen was saying, lots of dragons and pitfalls and everything else. And so we meaningfully started in 2001, Kristen and I, thinking that we could easily get this annotated data set for Microsoft AI to do their machine learning and all these things, and then realized just to get the annotated data set is actually going to take quite a bit. So we are putting out this paper that should be submitted soon that's going to provide all the open source code to do this and walk through the whole process. We decided to use 3 case studies for this in Somerset, Canada, the Año Nuevo Island, and Cape Cod Bay, just because this gives us an idea of what 3 different species. Small-toothed whale, the beluga, the North Atlantic right whale, and then also just the elephant seals at Año Nuevo. We just used as 3 case studies for 3 areas that I'm particularly familiar with. So the raw level 1B image has the least amount of processing, so it's not projected. That's why it looks like big smears. It has not been georectified, orthorectified, radiometrically corrected, any of that stuff. So we needed to figure out really a way to take these multispectral image, which is the low resolution color image there on the left, and then the panchromatic higher resolution, and really produce something that's going to be somewhat equatable to like their level 3D product, which is Maxar's higher level product. It's usually not affordable to most people, or the studies that have been done, for a reason, they use very limited amount of imagery because you have to pay a lot to get a high processed image. So we wanted to come with some open source workflow that could produce a better image. So we did. We came up with a whole process of doing all these steps. And so for doing those 3 steps that I mentioned initially, with the projection, the orthorectification, and radiometric correction, we worked with the Polar Geospatial Center, who already has open source tools that we can use to do these mostly in 1 step, and then working with open source tools and GDAL to do the pan sharpening. So the projection, that's just simply taking, your global, your Earth sphere and putting it on a flat surface. So in satellite imagery land, that's usually in UTM. So again, this is all done within the 1 tool. And then also doing the orthorectification. So it's really important to, it can be more important, especially on land, and some people say that when you're doing stuff in the ocean, you don't really have to orthorectify. That's the process of, using a digital elevation model, so your terrain, and so you get a more accurate location. So obviously, if you're in the mountains somewhere, that's gonna probably make a bigger difference. We have found differences in a lot of our animals are coastal, and the way the satellite image takes that image strip, it does include land in part of that, and so it does actually make a difference. You should actually apply this. This is, we've talked to many people that went back and forth on this. We've tried it out, and the DEM does make a decent difference. So then after that, we do something called radiometric correction, and that's basically just to correct for atmospheric interference and topographic variation within and environmental conditions. So, there's a lot of glint, there's a lot of absorption and scattering going on with the satellite, and so there's certain techniques or code that you can use that'll help improve the quality of the image. So once that step is done, then we have our image out of that tool, basically. And then we go ahead and we pan sharpen that. And that's using the GDAL library. And again, all this code is provided in the paper if anyone's interested. And then finally, this is the final step is in the pan sharpening. And so this is just taking your low resolution multispectral image, you're combining it with your high resolution panchromatic image so that you get a final image that's in color and it's in high resolution. And there are many algorithms to do this. And, it's kind of a little bit of a preference. There's, some of them are more mathematically simpler than others. You can write your own. For this purpose, we chose to use Brovie, just because Brovie is a pretty common one, and it is freely open source available already, and we didn't have to write our own, but that certainly is an option that we're looking into in future iterations. So in conclusion, basically, in our results here, the level 1B images that that you saw before, this is what it looks like when we get it. And after we process it through, well, this is the level 3D. This was Maxar's high resolution. And then ours, after we apply the Gaia workflow in the pre-processing, it's looking at least just as good, as not better, as the level 3 product. So we're pretty pleased with that. Again, this is an iterative process, and so we're continually looking for ways and things that we can integrate to make these images more clear and easy for us to identify. So in conclusion, our higher level satellite products, they are, in Maxar, they are proprietary. Even their pan sharpening method, it's not available through Maxar. So that really limits our transparency and our reproducibility, and that's something that's really critical to our foundation and what we're trying to do. The pre-processing workflow with Maxar changes, like I said, as technology matures. And so the discrepancies just, they get enhanced between different images and different time periods. So we're, again, trying to really make this the first open source pre-processing workflow to enhance marine mammal detection. And then, the overall goal is just to make this that it can support a broader collaboration and aligns with international efforts and best practices. I know IWC has an intersessional or a correspondence group on satellite imagery, and that's been talked a lot about as well. And that's something we've really, it's just kind of core to us, is that we want to make something that everybody can kind of use. So that's it. So thank you. I'm not going to touch this anymore.
Okay, we got started a little late, then had a little bit of technical difficulty, and thank you, Kim and Kristen, for getting us almost back on time despite all that. I think we're going to hold any questions so that we kind of stay as close as possible to the timeline for the folks online. So if we have time after the talks are done before the break, maybe we'll do some questions then. But let's just move on to Tony Fischbach talking about satellite monitoring of Pacific walrus. Tony, are you there, and are you ready to begin?
I am. I think I need to share my screen.
Excellent. Thank you.
Let's see if I can do that properly. Good. Okay. Let me know if you can see my screen here. Oh, so you got it? And I hear quite the echo. Do I need to turn my...
Hey, Tony, this is Brady speaking. We can see your screen, but it looks like it's pretty zoomed in, and we're only seeing the corner of USGS. So let's just hold on for a second and see if it's on our end. It looks like the public online are seeing your slides perfectly. It's just us in the room. So give us 1 minute while we figure out what's going on.
And I had a big feedback issue here. I'm going to find my controls to turn off my... Can you address that? How's that now?
Yeah, this is Brady.
Do you have an echo still?
So we can still in the room. Tony, can you hear me
I'm
okay?
let me know if you can hear me. It sounds like I've lost my sound. Give me a thumbs up if you can still hear my voice.
Tony, we can hear you.
Okay, good. So I'll keep my speaker off so we don't get that feedback, and I'll jump in on the talk if you're good. Just give me a thumbs up if you're good.
Just 1 minute, Tony. This laptop we can see. Should I share this up for?
Okay, is that a thumbs up? Jumping in?
1 minute.
No, they're still having trouble in the
Oh,
room.
waiting?
No.
Okay.
You're still having trouble in the room. We're fine online.
And I'll be joined by Rebecca Taylor, who is my co-author on this with Dave Douglas and Megan Ferguson. And Rebecca will be able to address any questions about the statistical analysis that we brought in here.
One of the audience members did say there's still some echo online.
Okay, Tony, we are now good in the room. Sorry for
Okay,
the
good.
echo.
Okay, I'll start with my talk then. The talk for our group. First of all, USGS is a science agency within the Department of Interior. USGS has neither management nor policy authority. Our mission is to deliver open and unbiased science. Within USGS, our team develops methods to monitor Pacific walrus populations and delivers findings to support the Department of Interior and Native Alaskans for the management of Pacific walruses. Here, I will present on recently developed methods to monitor Pacific walruses using satellite imagery. In addition to scientists from the USGS Alaska Science Center, our team includes Megan Ferguson from the Biodiversity Research Institute, who's well known for her Arctic marine mammal aerial survey work and who is contributing statistical expertise to our studies. So if I can advance the slide. The United States, the conservation and protection of the Pacific walrus are governed by the Marine Mammal Protection Act. This federal law requires estimates of minimum population size, an understanding of regional distribution, and site-specific monitoring for management. The Pacific walrus is central to the cultural identity and food security of 5 linguistically distinct cultures across the Bering Strait. Not only does this human dimension require that science be conducted that is relevant to sustaining these social systems, but also that science be done in a manner that minimizes disturbance to the resource and its users. Pacific walrus comprises a single pan-mictic stock that occupies continental shelf waters of the Pacific Arctic, spanning sectors of the United States and Russian Federation. Here you see the generalized winter range. In spring, females and young follow the sea ice retreat into the Chukchi Sea, where they occupy specific regions, while most males remain in the Bering Sea. In the absence of sea ice, walruses gather in large herds on shore at habitually used locations, commonly known as haulouts, visible here as red dots along the Russian and Alaskan coasts. When walruses gather in large herds on shore, they can be monitored by satellite imagery. USGS obtains satellite imagery through 5 American and European agencies and 6 commercial missions. In this talk, I will follow an outline. I'll present both recent findings and briefly touch on ongoing research. Let's start by seeing what we can see from above. Before we could interpret satellite imagery, we needed imagery of walrus herds collected from above. USGS collects aerial imagery using small, uncrewed aerial systems remotely piloted without disturbing walruses. We collected these imagery in cooperation with local Alaska native wildlife authorities and in the past by collaborating with Russian partners. Here, you see a herd extending along 700 meters of Chukchi Sea coast. Here, you see the same herd concurrently imaged from orbit using an optical sensor on board a satellite. USGS developed methods to delineate herd outlines from both aerial and satellite imagery and quantify the area that herds occupy. Optical sensors can effectively see walrus herds from orbit if there are no clouds. Fortunately, there are clouds most of the time. Fortunately, radar pulses can see through clouds. Radar pulse backscatter can be formed into an image through a process known as synthetic aperture radar. In these radar images, walrus herds contrast with their environment because they reflect radar pulses very differently from the surrounding beach sand and gravel. For this talk, we use both optical and radar imagery to monitor 8 haul-out locations across the Chukchi Sea, where large walrus herds have formed on shore in recent decades. Outlines we drew around the herds allowed us to build a chronology of herd occurrence and area. Here you see satellite monitoring data from a single site during a single season. Each X indicates times when we had a clear view from orbit, but no walrus herds apparent. Each blue point indicates times when walrus herds were apparent on shore and the area they occupied. These data have been provided in near real time to managers to address disturbance concerns and are openly available through USGS data release. While herd occurrence and area are useful information, it's important that we also estimate herd abundance. You can estimate herd abundance as the product of herd area, interpreted from satellite imagery, and herd density. We obtained herd density data from drone surveys, which have been collected at 7 sites across the Chukchi Sea in both the US and Russia, with USGS and Fish and Wildlife Service funding. Yellow dots in the picture indicate walruses counted in randomly selected grid cells across these drone survey images. Observed walrus herd densities expressed as the number of walruses in 10 by 10 meter grid cells range from 10 to 150. Although the overall mean was close to 80, densities were variable between and within study sites. Because not all hullouts that we monitored with satellite imagery had drone survey data, we required a hierarchical Bayesian model to predict herd densities at sites with and without drone survey data. In this graph, the predicted herd densities at selected hullouts with and without drone survey data is represented by the breadth of the colored bars. The dot in the middle is the mean predicted herd density. We found less herd density variation among herds observed at Seretse Common, shown in orange. There was more variation at Point Lay, shown in green, and even more at Bankrum, shown in blue. There's even greater variation at a new site because there are no survey data at the new site, shown in gray. Here, you see the abundance estimates for one study year, derived from the predicted herd densities in satellite imagery data. In the graph, the date is on the x-axis, and walrus abundance is on the y-axis. The predicted abundance estimate is shown with a small horizontal mark, and the statistical prediction interval, or the uncertainty, is denoted by the breadth of the vertical bars. Color coding matches to the sites circled on the map. We've monitored and summarized these data for 8 study years. These day-to-day chronologies of hullout occupancy and abundance may be used by managers for local and maritime planning. We only detected herds at 3 of the 8 study sites, 1 in Alaska, Point Lay in green, and 2 in Russia, Seretse Common in orange and Bankrum in blue. Herd sizes could be as large as 184,000 walruses, which we observed in Seretse Common in 2022. In most years, herd abundance shifts from Point Lay, shown in green in Alaska, to Seretse Common, shown in orange down near the Bering Straits. This movement of walruses to Seretse Common is typical and consistent with previous tracking studies that we have done. From this, we understand that in most years, all walruses in the Chukchi Sea gather at Seretse Common prior to winter migration south into the Bering Sea. The Marine Mammal Protection Act requires managers to submit regular stock assessments. Stock assessments must report a minimum population size, which we call NMIN. NMIN is used to calculate potential biological removal, which is very important for managers. The default method for calculating NMIN is to estimate the mean and coefficient of variation of a total population size, apply a formula based on log normal distribution, and take the 20th percentile. In this picture on the right, the population size mean is at peak. NMIN would be at the dashed red line. Other NMIN calculation methods are allowed if they're justifiable. For example, the 2023 Pacific Stock Assessment Report used the 20th percentile of population posterior distribution, while the 2014 Stock Assessment Report used the mean population size. Only 3 Pacific walrus population size estimates have been obtained over the past 35 years. Agency guidance requires reexamination of NMIN if the estimate data is more than 8 years old. Thus, there's an interest in methods to determine NMIN that may be more timely. Because our herd abundance estimate of 184,000 walruses at Seretse Common approached the most recently reported NMIN, we reasoned that satellite monitoring data might inform NMIN for stock assessment reports. We propose estimating NMIN, the minimum population size, based on the peak herd abundance observed during an 8-year rolling window. To estimate NMIN, we need to account for walruses that were in the water unavailable to be detected in satellite imagery. To do this, we divided the peak onshore abundance observed by satellite by the maximum proportion that may be out of the water at one time. The maximum proportion of walruses out of water at any time has been found similar across published studies, and the highest proportion, close to 3/4, was observed in data obtained at Seretse Common. To be conservative, we use this highest value, since this value produces the smallest N-min estimate for the maximum observed herd size. Thus, we estimated the 2022 N-min as 250,000 walruses. The N-min estimated using our satellite monitoring method is to measure it with the 2023 stock assessment's N-min estimate of 214,000 walruses. The satellite imagery monitoring approach shown here for estimating N-min is cost-effective and requires minimal logistical effort. Therefore, it could be applied as an institutional monitoring tool. If adopted, our proposed strategy for estimating N-min might be improved through precision improvements of the abundance estimates. Our current method for estimating herd abundance relies on drawing an outline around a herd and multiplying the outlined area by densities predicted from drone surveys. In our ongoing research, we're examining patterns of radar backscatter from satellite imagery in relation to walrus counts from drone imagery to ascertain if correlations are strong enough to improve precision of our abundance estimates. Radar backscatter across a walrus herd appears to mimic walrus density. In order to explore this, we obtained support from multiple agencies and collaborated with the Point Lay Walrus and Wildlife Commissioner, Robert Lisburn, to collect concurrent aerial survey imagery and satellite radar imagery. Concurrent. We then counted walruses in 10 by 10 grid cells overlaid on the aerial survey images and quantified the radar backscatter in the same cells. We're analyzing the relationship between the intensity of radar backscatter in each cell with the number of walruses counted in the cell. We look forward to reporting on these results after collecting additional concurrent drone and radar imagery this year, and actually, hopefully by Friday. Our proposed strategy for estimating N-min relies on previously published telemetry data to estimate the maximum proportion of walruses that have ever been recorded out of water at the same time. It would be better to estimate that proportion of walruses hauled out of water at Seretse Common during the same time that we image the haul out by satellite. USGS has awarded our group a study grant to develop remotely deployed tracking tags with sufficient longevity to collect these data. If additional funds are appropriated and made available, we will deploy tags at Point Lay, track them to Seretse Common. We will then estimate the size of the regional population using Seretse Common by using a combination of satellite radar imagery and tracking telemetry data. This data collection and analysis strategy is similar to what we've previously applied for regional abundance studies, where we used aerial imagery from drones combined with telemetry collected at the same time. We anticipate that this strategy will deliver improved precision relative to previous abundance estimation methods while requiring substantially less logistical effort. To put this in context, each of the 3 recent Pacific walrus abundance estimates improved on precision relative to previous methods. Here you see how precision improved from the 2006 total population size aerial survey, shown in blue, to the 2013 through 2017 genetic marker capture population size estimate of calves, juveniles, and adult females, shown in tan, to the 2 regional abundance size estimates that combine telemetry with drone survey imagery. Because using imagery combined with telemetry has delivered tight confidence bounds, we anticipate that this strategy will improve abundance precision when applied with satellite imagery. You can read about this work in the forthcoming issue of the Wildlife Society Bulletin. We would love to discuss our ongoing research with you and hope you will ask us about it. We appreciate your time and attention. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Tony, and thank you for persevering through the ongoing little foibles of technology. We are back exactly on time. So we're going to move to the next talk. It's Darcy Bradley, and she's going to tell us about satellite detection of whales.
Great. Hi, everyone. Just give me a minute here to get this going. All right, quick tech check. Are you seeing a full screen slide? I cannot hear you if you are responding.
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, wonderful. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Darcy Bradley, and I am a lead scientist at the Nature Conservancy here in California. I am super excited to speak with you all today about the Nature Conservancy's involvement in emerging technologies for remote detection and assessment, and specifically on our efforts related to the use of satellite imagery to detect whales. All right, did the slide just change?
Yes, again.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. I think we're off to the races now. No more of that. All right, so TNC has been involved in whale conservation for the past decade, and we primarily work to address the two leading causes of whale mortality, which are entanglement in fishing gear and ship strikes. These are very dynamic and overlapping conservation challenges that require risk mitigation solutions. And those solutions rely heavily on having really good information about when and where whales and those growing risks overlap. All right. So we have worked to shed light on this topic globally through a partnership with NOAA, the University of Washington, Global Fishing Watch, the Benioff Ocean Initiative, to map the ship strike threat to whales across the ocean in an effort that was led by Dr. Ananisi in collaboration with dozens of scientists around the world. We were able to compile a data set of 435,000 whale locations to generate global distribution models for 4 globally ranging species. These data were then combined with over 35 billion vessel positions from nearly 200,000 individual ships to produce a global estimate of whale ship collision risk. So these risk hotspots are shown here in these dark purple tones, and they are enormous, which is daunting. But this work actually revealed that implementing protective measures across just 2.6% of the ocean's surface could save the lives of thousands of whales. So this effort really did an enormous job at compiling the largest global whale observation data set available. And it's also an important representation of where in the world the risk to whales is highest, which can be used to guide the implementation of whale-safe programs. But as we all know, to actually implement real-time dynamic solutions for ships or fishing fleets and to inform risk models with an understanding of underlying whale population dynamics, we need much more temporally and spatially refined information on whale location and whale density, such as the type of data that is used to inform stock assessments. There are many different ways folks are actively collecting this information by plane, by boat, from shore. And we at the Nature Conservancy, like so many others, as Kristen mentioned, saw an opportunity for the use of satellite imagery to augment and support these existing data collection efforts by detecting whales from space. All right, so what you're looking at here, it is not satellite imagery, it is drone imagery. But as you will see momentarily, and as you saw in Kristen and Kim's presentation, satellite images don't always look the nicest. So this looks nice, and it also serves to illustrate the basic principle behind what we were trying to achieve. We partnered with Ludwig Venigen and Eduardo Cuesto Lazaro at the Polytechnic University of Catalonia in Barcelona, Spain, to develop machine learning classification models that can detect humpback and gray whales in high-resolution Maxar satellite imagery. Okay, as promised, a little glimpse at an actual satellite image. So to overcome what is actually, it's kind of a needle in a haystack problem, right? To find whales across vast ocean expanses in an image that is taken from space. What we did was the team started by examining imagery from places where we knew we could find whales. And Kristen spoke a little bit about this in some of the prior studies that have been done as well. So this image here, it shows an aggregation of gray whales that was observed in Worldview 3 imagery at Boca de Santo Domingo in Baja California, Mexico. This image has been statistically contrasted and corrected much in the way that Kristen and Kim discussed to give these gray whales this kind of artificial pink color, which allows both the human eye to better differentiate them. We also use a similar statistical contrasting method that allows a machine learning model to better classify and detect these whales. So using a highly iterative approach, the team was able to compile sufficient training data. So initially this was done through manual identification of whales in hotspots like the one we just looked at. And then through a series of bad to a little bit better to even better models that eventually resulted in a set of identified California-specific gray and humpback whales that were used to create highly accurate whale detection models. The recall, or a true positive rate, as we refer to it as, is 95% for gray whales and 84% for humpback whales in a model that actually combines the detectors. And most of the confusion in finding whales is between different species of whales. It's less so between whales and other things like rocks or boats. So to date, this model has been used by accessing archival imagery from Maxar to detect over 5,000 gray whales, 4,000 of which were detected in California, and nearly 2,500 humpback whales in California, as well as a handful of other places. And a sample of these are shown in this figure that's showing this swath of coast along Southern California from Point Conception down to just past the border with Mexico. So this work is currently in a late stage of preparation. There are many co-authors from NOAA as well. And once it is published, we will publish all of the underlying detection models. We'll make them open access. And the hope there is that they can be continued to be improved upon and developed and expanded. But in the meantime, while we're waiting for that publication process to take place, we have made the whale detection models and an accompanying workflow that allows users to check and confirm whale detections accessible in this easy-to-use platform, which we invite everyone attending today and online to check out right now if you want to. We call it Whales AI. It can be found at whalesai.org. I will note there is no www, so just whalesai.org. And once you go to that site, Whales AI includes this publicly accessible Explore page. That's what it's called on the tab up there. And this allows anyone to view the location, which is color-coded by species. So you see the blue points are humpbacks, the orange points are gray whales, of the whales that have been detected and validated by authenticated Whales AI users. So Kristen already mentioned this, but there are licensing restrictions with Maxar imagery, which restricts us from being able to display actual whale imagery on this Explore page. And in fact, Whales AI was developed with NOAA and other government agency users in mind because high-resolution satellite imagery can be enormously cost prohibitive, as was already mentioned, but NOAA users have the ability to access both archival or historical Maxar imagery as well as task satellites to collect new imagery over desired locations. So on Whales AI, this is just showing another screenshot of an authenticated user workflow. Users can upload the Maxar satellite imagery that they have access to. They can run the humpback and gray whale detection model, and then they can view their satellite scene. So that is like the image in total, and then the individual detection chips, which are shown towards the bottom of the screen, in this really highly interactive interface. They can play around with the color contrasting to make it brighter or darker, depending on the image, and click through and see those different individual detection chips. This can be done like this, kind of outside of a map interface. It can also be done within a map interface, where users can then really inspect and zoom in on individual whale detections or groups of whales, as was the case in this fairly amazing example of a pod of gray whales that was detected off the coast of Humboldt. There were over 90 whales in this single pod, all grouped together in a fairly close area, which was really beautiful to see on these images. Once these detections are validated and the user has gone through the workflow, they can then download all this information in a CSV file that displays both the scene information, like the date and the timestamp of the satellite image, and it also includes the bounding box of these chips, we call them, that contain that whale. It has the latitude and longitude of each detection, and it also has the model confidence associated with that detection. So for example, this whale we're looking at here has an associated confidence of 90%, which is seen over on the right side of the screen. Users can also add user notes to just note things like this pod seems to be traveling next to a pod of something else we saw, or near some vessel, or in a shipping lane, or whatever it might be. So the application of whale detection data, the applications are numerous, and we think that they are also important for inputs to species distribution models and for stock assessments, like we're all here to talk about today. And we haven't actually explored these specific applications, but we really would like to. And so for those interested, please do follow up with me. I also apologize in advance for putting my colleague on the spot, but my colleague Sarah Orofino, who is based down in San Diego, is in the audience today. If you are comfortable, Sarah, I want to give a little wave so people can identify you. I am so sorry for asking you to do that, but please find Sarah. She knows all about this model and this system and would be happy to field your questions, as I was not able to attend in person today. Thank you, Sarah. Sorry again. So what we have done with this tool, though, is we've piloted the use of satellite whale detections for informing vessel speed reduction programs, which are voluntary programs by which shipping vessels agree to slow down in certain regions and at certain times of year that align with the migration period of endangered whale species. So we worked in really close collaboration with the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation and NOAA's Office of National Marine Sanctuaries, based out of Santa Barbara. And we tasked these 6 areas over the Santa Barbara Channel shipping lane, which are pictured here in the left image, to collect Worldview 1, 2, and 3 imagery between March 1st and October 31st. It actually extended a little bit beyond that. And over the course of what ended up being a little more than 8 months, actually, that successfully collected about 400 images. Nearly all of those, for whatever reason, because of the way that tasking priorities work, came from these green regions. There were like a handful from the yellow region and absolutely none from those regions 5 and 6. This program resulted in the certain detection of 43 humpback whales and several additional likely detections, all of which are shown in green on the right-hand side figure. And what was really interesting was that actually 4 of those certain humpback detections were found outside the bounds of the original study period and outside of when humpbacks are expected to be in the area, which was all the way into November. So this pilot effort, it really taught us a lot, and it resulted in several enhancements to the Whales AI tool, just to improve the user experience and make it useful for the way in which those managing this information actually need to use it to inform management actions like the vessel speed reduction program. And so a lot of those enhancements are now live on the application, and some are currently under development, so more on those very soon. This effort, though, has also made it really clear to us that there is vast potential to use this tool for additional applications, including stock assessment modeling and other efforts where whale locations, general movement, and migration timing are required inputs. So just to circle back on this, we really are currently working to identify new users within NOAA in particular that can help to pilot this tool so that we can really continue to refine and improve Whales AI to best suit the needs of those charged with managing these important species. We are also looking into ways that we might gain access to Maxar imagery ourselves through things like in-kind donations to process the imagery using Whales AI, which we could then deliver to partner agencies with those count and location data sets in hopes of really like lessening the burden on NOAA staff time that it just takes to go through this workflow. We have also started to explore what it might look like and where there's a need to create additional detection models for other species. We currently have a gray whale and a humpback whale detection model. What other species are top of that list in terms of adapting that model for new species? And ideally, we would do this in partnership with others that are the most interested in using that information. And then finally, we are looking for additional applications. So beyond the vessel speed reduction program, beyond some of the entanglement work that we're also involved in along the California coast. So those applications include stock assessment and other marine mammal science needs. And with really the goal of using this tool and this workflow to deliver information and inform whale management and research. That is all from me. I do hope to follow up with anyone during the panel session, but also please do grab my colleague Sarah, who is there, if you have other questions that fall out of the scope of the ability for us to answer your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Darcy. That was really fantastic, and we are now ahead of time. And I'm kind of hesitant to allow a question or two, but I think I will because we could get behind again. But let's go ahead because we've had 4 out of 5 of our talks, and have a question or two from any of the commissioners. And then we'll just quickly jump to the final talk. Randy, do you have any questions as yet? That would be a no. Well,
Not I. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. I guess he said not I. It's a Canadian accent I didn't get. So I've burned enough time not having any questions asked to move on to the final talk by Penny Clark on satellites to study live and stranded whales. Why don't we get that all queued up, and we'll maybe just relax a little bit until 25 after the hour.
We're all going to no longer see the time, so if anyone wants to shout out when I'm ready to go.
Okay, well, it's just for people who may be joining online for your talk at the scheduled time, we'll wait about another minute, but it looks like we've worked through all the foibles, and now we've got sound and we've got your presentation up, so just maybe stand by for part of a minute. Okay, well, why don't you go ahead? We're close enough to 25 after, and then you'll be able to get back to bed earlier.
so much, and thanks everyone for welcoming me today. So my name's Penny Clark. I'm based at the British Antarctic Survey and the University of Edinburgh, and I want to talk to you about the insights that satellites are offering for whale conservation for both live and stranded cetaceans. And I'm going to be focusing on the optical side of satellites, but I may touch on some other bits while I'm going through as well. So let's think about the live cetacean aspect of this. We've already heard from other speakers today and from the published literature that we can detect and count live cetaceans from space. Now, this is common knowledge, but it was touched on at the start or introduction of today's session that the monitoring so far, at least in the published aspect anyway, is sort of not spatially and temporally that great at the moment. You know, we don't have any long-term monitoring programs in place. And if we look at some of the challenges that we've got with live cetacean monitoring, we've tried to understand the differentiation of species and how that works. We've also had papers that have looked at the depth below the surface at which we can see cetaceans. We still have some issues with both those aspects, and there are many other challenges that exist with live cetacean monitoring from space. Now, complementary to live cetacean data, there is also cetacean strandings. And cetacean strandings can offer insights for conservation managers into things like local cetacean populations, their distribution, and the threats they face, but also they can act as early warning systems and offer insights for ocean health, animal health, and concerns for human health too. And the study of strandings is actually internationally recognized by a number of agreements and bodies, such as the International Whaling Commission, the Convention on Migratory Species, and in 2019, the World Marine Mammal Conference had it as one of their core goals. Right, in terms of the monitoring and how we monitor strandings around the globe, which is stranding networks, you can see that it's biased towards populated and resourced coastlines, particularly in Europe and North America. And you can see from these highlighted regions that geographically remote areas, complex coastlines, and areas of geopolitical unrest have little to no monitoring. Now, in terms of both live and stranded cetacean monitoring, we know that there are gaps in how we do that. And even in comparatively well-surveyed regions like the UK, where I'm from, there was a recent report by EFRA, the European Food and Rural Affairs Agency, and in this they published that in the UK waters, all cetacean species were listed as unknown. And not only that, this report also said that the current legal framework or protection that's in place for marine mammals in UK waters was incoherent and insufficient. And they summarised this with a recommendation of ways in which we could address these gaps. And one of those primary solutions was to use satellites. Now, the thing is that there is this common misconception that satellites are going to fill all of these data gaps because satellites can access anywhere on the globe and they can take images at any place at any time. But actually, that's not really the case. And there are a number of reasons as to why that is. So these are just some of them. First off is primary environmental conditions. It's been touched upon before, which is clouds. And then in the case of live cetacean monitoring only, it's wind speeds as well. Then you've got things like satellite sensor specification and access. So the cost of satellite imagery has come up a few times, but also revisit rate. How often is the satellite returning to the same place on Earth? Then you've got things like the features themselves. So the cetacean species or behaviors or characteristics, do they exhibit behaviors that helps their detection or hinders their detection? Are they confounding features such as trees or wood on beaches that look like stranded cetaceans or boats that might be mistaken for whales? Again, things to consider. And then finally, there's things like image quality. So this might be image darkness, glare, or in this case, lots of ice that may cause nausea. Now, of these, if I was a conservation manager, things I'd be thinking about is I want to, one, make informed decision-making for my conservation outcomes. And if I was thinking about what tool is going to be most applicable, I don't want to just start investing in satellite imagery if it's not actually the best tool for my area or it's going to be useful. And so really, if I was thinking about that, the primary thing I'm going to want to think about is what are the conditions in my region of interest, and are they suitable for satellites? So in this case, primary environmental conditions, cloud cover, and wind speed. And so what I set about doing was trying to develop a framework that could allow us to assess the feasibility of a region based on cloud cover and wind speeds to analyse which area is going to be suitable for live and stranded cetacean monitoring. And this is an open source workflow that you can use anywhere around the globe to assess an area for the suitability. And so the outcomes of this, it takes in climate data. You can set the average for any number of years. So in this case, I've used a 5-yearly monthly average climate data, and you'll get an output that looks something similar to this. So in the case of the UK, the gaps are in winter monitoring and also in offshore areas for live cetaceans. Now, this takes cloud cover and applies a threshold of less than 60% monthly average total cloud cover, and applies a wind speed restriction of Beaufort 4. And what you can see is, in relation to EFRA's report that satellites are going to be the year-round solution, that's not the case. In the winter, satellites, you can see the areas are restricted to nearshore waters. It's not going to address gaps in the winter. During the boreal spring and summer, it may give us access to do some monitoring offshore in the offshore regions, which is really cool. But this is a good demonstration as to how we can help inform conservation decision-making and policy. Now, again, if I flip that and look at the complete other end of the world around the same latitude, this is the Falkland Islands. It lies in some of the windiest, stronger winds in the world. And you can see that's reflected in map A on the left. Within the EEZ, the darker blue area, there's very limited areas that meet the suitability. And this is because of those wind speeds. If we look on the right, where there's a less than 80% monthly average total cloud cover, and this is just focused on strandings, you can see that actually the Falklands could be suitable for using satellites to monitor strandings. Now, I say this, but this is just looking at the environmental conditions. Whether that's actually useful for the Falklands or not, there would need to be onward investigations to that, but this is a primary way that can be proactive approach to informing conservation decision making and more informed financial placement of resources. And so that is in submission and hopefully will be out soon. Now, let's say I've done my feasibility assessment. My area of speciality is actually strandings from space. And this is the first time it's been discussed this evening, or my evening, your day. So far, this area of using satellites to study cetaceans compared to live cetaceans, not much has been done. We've been able to detect and count baleen whales in one single application, and that was here from Fretwell et al.'s study in 2019. Now, if I plot up all of the mass strandings before 2018, this is what you see. And actually, the majority of mass stranding events are odontocetes. So that's the smaller toothed whale and dolphin species. So really, the question that we want to be asking is, what is the smallest stranded cetacean that we can see from space? Because that's going to govern how useful this tool is in the future. So the pilot whale is a species that commonly mass strands, and it's on average around 4 to 5 meters in length. And based on what we know from Haneke Ben studies and also Tony's studies that's online with regards to the walrus, they're around the same size. And so theoretically, this should be feasible. This is pretend an average size 4 to 5 meter pilot whale. And at 30 centimeter spatial resolution, the highest commercially available resolution imagery, this is the level of detail you would expect. So it looks pretty convincing, right? It should be possible. Now, in terms of spatial resolution, the higher the spatial resolution, the more detail, but the more the imagery costs. And so another question that we should be asking is, what's the minimum spatial resolution that we need to invest in to be able to count with confidence? So again, we can start to reduce the costs associated with the tool's application. Now, the ideal situation would be we can collect ground counts at the same time that we collect aerial imagery, at the same time that we collect satellite imagery. And you didn't think I was going to go away just yet. But yeah, it's not as simple as that. I tried to do my best, and we were able to get a good few bits of data. And what we did then was we asked 3 experts in studying wildlife from space to manually count these imagery and then compared those to ground counts from either aerial or ground surveys. And the open source workflows and the data standard that is for the Strands from Space community is available in association with this publication that's in submission. And drum roll, because this is the first publication or published photo of a odon seat stranding or mass stranding from space. And what you can see is it's really convincing that we could detect and count these with confidence, which is super cool. Now, that image was ideal conditions. And what I mean by that is it's really high contrast of the features compared to the background. There really wasn't much cloud or any cloud in that image. There was no confounding features such as marine debris. The angle of collection was almost directly overhead, so it's not swinging and you haven't got any distortion of the imagery. And this was the outcome. So this is the same image across 3 different spatial resolutions. And the different colors represent the different observers, and that's broken down by their certainty in those detections. And the gray line represents the ground count. And what you can see is where 2 or more observers identified the same individual compared to the ground count, even at 50 centimeter resolution, it's 86% agreement to the ground count, which is amazing. And it increases with the spatial resolution to the point where we almost overcount at 15 centimeters. If we then break that down by the certainty compared to the ground count, so this is the level at which the confidence of the observer in those detections, again, it's really high, even at 50 centimeter spatial resolution. And the increase between 50 and 30 centimeters is actually quite substantial. But what you'll notice is there isn't really that much increase at 15 centimeters. And similar to what Haneke-Ben found with the Walrus study, at 15 centimeters, if you actually look at the breakdown of certainty, the lower level of certainty, so the possible detections, actually increased in the 15 centimeter imagery. And what we find is that this artificial uplift process, it almost introduces artifacts that aren't representative of reality on the ground, suggesting that 30 centimeters would be most suitable and helps us reduce the costs associated with that. Now, as I said, this was the most ideal conditions and it worked well, but that wasn't always the case, and it did decrease with some of those reasons that I just mentioned earlier. One of which, as I said, is cloud cover. Now, on average, our imagery were collected about 6 days after the events actually took place. Now, this gets you thinking, well, can we bypass clouds? And thankfully, this has already been discussed already, but synthetic aperture radar is a method not only to bypass clouds, but also to image in darkness. And this could be amazing for stranding events where they happen at any given time. So this could help us maybe achieve somewhere close to emergency response. And so I'm not going to show you the synthetic aperture radar just yet, and the reason why is because it's also involved in this publication that's associated with the pilot whale images I showed earlier, and I want to keep something as a surprise for you. But what we show is the first detection and count of acetation. Doesn't matter whether it's live or stranded in synthetic aperture radar, this is the first detection. And what we were able to say is that both optical and synthetic aperture radar satellites could together complement existing stranding monitoring methods. And if we can continue to refine the tool and work towards more equal access to imagery, it could help stranding networks worldwide work towards achieving their long-term monitoring and conservation goals. Now, this has been applied to where we've got information on the ground, right? So we can validate the detections we're seeing. But what about where we don't have information on the ground, which is really where we're saying that this is going to be useful, right? Remote coastlines. And so one of the things I'm starting to try and do is tease out whether spectral resolution, so this is information from the electromagnetic spectrum that we can't see with our own human eyes, does this information hold anything that can act as a proxy for detection compared to having no information? Can it help us? And that's something I'm trying to elucidate at the moment with some of the collection that you can see here. I went to visit some cetacean that had stranded to collect some samples. Then, so far we've used manual detection. We've heard already in the discussions that this takes time. And so we're also trying to evaluate whether we can use automated detection methods. So we're implementing some machine learning models to try and test this. And then I just want to come and bring your attention to a group that exists. And to do that, I want to start here. So based on the feasibility assessments that I started with, one of the main outputs that came out of it was that the tropics would be one of the most promising areas for use of satellites. And I think that's probably sensical because it's great weather, and yeah, hopefully it makes sense that those outputs came out as we would expect. But what we should take note of here is that the tropics are some of the most ocean-dependent communities. Not only that, but you can see that the majority of those coastlines fall within low-resource countries. And so this really brings around the question of equality of access to imagery, especially given the costs. And something that became very clear from my work, especially where I'm trying to validate things and information on the ground. And in this situation, my study areas aren't local to my region, and therefore that information has been crucial that has come from local collaborators, and this work would not have been possible without them, which really suggests and makes a clear point that people local to these areas should be implementing these studies. And this is one of the key core goals of the International Whaling Commission Satellites to Study Whales group. We exist, we're in, I think, over 100 members now. We exist to try and work towards 4 aims. This is the coordination of information, data, and code sharing, facilitating the development of automation methods, but to avoid duplication of effort between the groups that are working away internationally around the world. And then finally, this working towards equitable access to imagery, but also thinking about how we can share knowledge with things like open source pipelines or data sharing. And why this is important to everybody that's listening today. If you're actively in the community, please get involved and join us. You can do that through the Secretariat, contact the IWC Secretariat and ask to join if you're actively using satellites to study whales. And again, we need efforts like this. We're at a point where this is just starting, so we can make a good standard so that we can internationally share data. We need to coordinate together as a group so that we can get satellite image providers on board for data sharing agreements. And these will be important for building large enough data sets to create really solid automated detection models. And with that, I just want to say thank you very much for your time, and thank you to my amazing supervisory team and many collaborators that probably aren't even on this slide. So yeah, thanks so much.
Okay, well, I think what we should do is give all of our speakers a round of applause for their excellent talks. I think that all the talks so far or the talks that we have really given us a lot of fodder for discussion during the upcoming panel discussion, opportunities for collaborations, questions, and I think what we should do is go ahead and break now until 15 after the hour. That's 3:15 p.m. local time here, but the next 15 on your clock wherever you are. Come on back for the panel discussion. Thank you.
My head is stuck in the clouds. She begs me to come down, says boy.
Recording in progress.
Thanks. Yes. All right, everyone, thank you for persevering and coming back for this discussion, which I think is going to be a really great part of this session. We have our 2 in-person presenters, Kim and Kristen are here. We also have Dave Johnson joining, and our other online speakers, I believe, are all on. I don't see Tony, but maybe there's just not a picture of him. So I think we have a lot to talk about here. We'll have a lot of questions, and we're going to kick off with having Dave Johnson from Duke join us, tell us a little bit about himself, why he's here, and give us some overview thoughts to sort of kick off the discussion. Also, just before you go, Dave, we're going to take questions kind of as we go. We'll let this kind of proceed organically with discussion amongst the panelists. It will be really interesting to hear you all talking to each other. I think we'll all learn a lot from that. but if audience members, commissioners, CSA members, staff, anyone has questions, people online, type those in, and we'll kind of weave those questions into the discussion as well. Okay, let's take it away, Dave.
Dave, you're on mute, sorry.
Yeah, there we go. You can hear me okay now? Awesome. Well, thanks, Jason. I appreciate the introduction. I'll just tell you a little bit more about myself. I work at Duke University. I'm a professor of the practice, and a lot of my research focuses on the use of technology in conservation issues. And a lot of that relates to marine mammals, including the use of satellites in a variety of contexts. And so it's really nice to be able to be here and see the progress and hear from these great researchers that are pushing forward these new tools. And I have, and I'm going to probably give Brady a heart attack, but I'm going to try and share an image here because I think Jason started it off really well with this issue that's associated with the fact that we don't see satellites being used in stock assessment programs, that there's been this very slow adoption, right? So he's saying maybe 25 years ago, people maybe saw it was possible, but then since it hasn't progressed like other technologies. And I wanted to try and kind of put that into context of a conceptual model that we could actually drop people's presentations into to show where we're at, right? And so I know Jason pretty well, and he's probably looking at this. Can you guys see this?
Yes.
You can, okay. He's probably looking at that slide and saying like, what are those axes? There's no scales. And so this is a conceptual model that was put together by Gartner that describes basically a hype cycle of technology, right? And so on that vertical axis is essentially the level of hype, how much visibility it has. And then across the horizontal axis is time. And technologies generally go through this particular sort of cycle. They have some type of trigger that gets people super excited, and people really love it, and they jump on the bandwagon, and lots of excitement. And that's great, right? And it pushes things forwards. And then people realize that it's actually a lot harder to really do it than they thought. And things drop into the valley of despair, or the trough of disillusionment. And after that, people like us start to continue doing this work and take us up the slope of enlightenment. And I think that's kind of where we are now. And we're getting to the point where if Jason's dream were to come true, we would have these satellites in full operational stock assessment programs to support the work that's being done. So let's just talk about the presentations that we had today and put them into this context. And maybe that'll help stimulate people to think about questions that they have, or the kind of just things that we need to talk about as we move forward. So starting off, Kristen and Kim did a really great job about showing how we can move out of this sort of trough of disillusionment by collaboration and building tools that are online and accessible to actually get people collaborating and working together to solve some of the challenges, right? So a lot of the technologies that Jason talked about that have progressed, things like drones, things like passive acoustic monitoring, are all things that people could mess with, right? Like I learned how to build hydrophones on a sailing boat in the middle of the Atlantic with PVC pipe and olive oil. But you can't do that with satellites, right? It's much harder. And so we need collaboration. We need those kinds of things to actually build this up, right? And those initial issues are associated with access to technology, the resolution of satellites initially, but more so now, how do we actually move past some of those technological things like the computational power needed to do this into dealing with the issues that we have about sharing data, right? And being able to collaborate with these data over different groups, which is a significant challenge for some types of satellite data. So we're moving now past this, and I think that Kristen and Kim did a really great job of showing how we can build these tools and get people working together to be able to do that. And then Tony actually provided probably the closest example of how we can move this directly into a stock assessment process, right? He showed how you can use satellite data coupled, fused with other forms of data to be able to calculate metrics that are critically important for stock assessments, right? So we can see how this tool right, can be used, right? So we're moving up the slope of enlightenment and getting to the place where we would be able to actually operationally deploy them like they're doing there for walruses. Darcy actually really made it very obvious to everyone that this is happening outside as well, right? And so that there's this amazing group of people outside government that are entrepreneurial and bring so much to the table, and that this drives home this need for more and better collaboration amongst both government and private groups, and that there's a lot of work to do, and that these are not competitive things, but an additive, right? And that we should be embracing all of these tools and bringing them together in ways that make them more accessible to everyone. And finally, I think Penny really kind of brought us to the top of the slope of enlightenment, right? She showed us how these tools can be applied in various places, and with other types of things that are important, like strandings, right? And how do we monitor things like UMEs, right? And how do we actually use those tools to be able to build into the stock assessment process for issues that are difficult to tackle, especially in really remote places. But I think the really enlightened part there was, right, we're at the point now where we can actually start defining when and where we should use the technology in a much more coherent way, right? So in that peak of it, of inflated expectations, it was going to be a tool that would save the world. And now we're at the point where we know it well enough that we can actually start thinking about how do we help people think about when to apply this tool, not can you do it? Right, we're past that now, and we're actually being able to decide when and where. And I think the other part that I was really glad that Penny brought up is that this peak of enlightenment, where we're getting onto the plateau of productivity, also means that we have to think about things globally, right? And access to satellite data is something that's expensive and challenging. It's challenging to share, and when we think about the work that we're doing, it's often in a global context. It's certainly an international context, and we need to make sure that that part is brought along as we expand these tools into use in these kinds of programs, stock assessment programs here in the U.S., but also in Canada and other nations where some of the species that we talk about migrate through the waters of many nations, right? And so we need to think about these tools across the range that I think we have responsibility to deal with. So I wanted to try and sort of set the stage for this and try and tie those things together. And I know it's not a really scientific curve, but it is helpful for us to think about, where we're at in this use of this technology. And if anything, it should give us some hope that we're actually getting to the point now where this is going to become really useful, right? And I think that's the nice thing about that plateau of productivity is that we're going to continue on, and there's a lot of hope for this technology as we move forward. So that's my summary, and I'm going to stop sharing that now. And Jason, I don't know, are we going to open it up to the floor for questions right away?
I think we should start with panelists asking each other questions, unless there's anything burning from the audience, and I'm not seeing that.
Just a quick note, maybe Rebecca wants to introduce herself before the panelists start going.
Okay, yes, thank you. Rebecca, go ahead and introduce yourself and explain your role in this work.
Thank you, guys. I'm privileged to be here. I am second author on the talk that Tony gave. I'm also with USGS Alaska Science Center, and I am a statistician. So I make Tony do the hard work, and then I sit at my computer and take care of it from that end.
I've reviewed some of your models, Rebecca, and I know that Tony's not doing all the hard work.
I'm flattered. I guess Tony and I have a little conversation to have after this. Thank you. As I said, it's a privilege to be here.
Well, thanks for joining us. And please, any panel members, go ahead and fire away.
Jason, can I ask something?
Of course.
I want to ask Dave a question. Dave, thank you so much I love that curve. And I wonder whether you're in your imagining of that curve for our ability to assess marine mammal stocks, you think that cetaceans are just shifted way to the left of pinnipeds. I love Tony's and Rebecca's work in walruses, but the ability to know where to look is so beneficial to them than it is for Darcy or Penny or Kim or it's so much harder. So just your thought on that.
Yeah, I'll go, and I'd love to hear what the rest of the panelists have to say about that too. Clearly, there are different sort of shifts, phase shifts. I think you could think about on this curve, and in some ways, pinnipeds are easier because you do know where to go and look, but they also become challenging, I think, in the automated detection world because they often look like rocks, and there's challenges there, and sometimes whales are in high contrast, and so I think the ability to know where to look is critical, especially when we're thinking about training data sets initially. And that's very helpful. But I do believe that there are some cetaceans that are like that as well. But yeah, I think you could have these kinds of a little bit phase shifted because of the life history modalities of the things. And I guess, the important point of that is that there's probably a curve like this for every species, right? In a way, right? Because they all have their own sort of good points and bad points. And so it may be that the peak of inflated expectations is never going to come down for species that are dark and always found in dark water or look exactly like rocks that are going to be really hard to find, right? Without incredibly expensive and energy consuming computational things. But other ones might be very accessible, and that maybe that trough of disillusionment is not going to be quite so deep. But I'd love to hear what the other folks say. These guys all have great experience in this world.
I think you, perfectly sum that up in terms of, with some species, I think there'll be more challenges compared to others, especially having a look at strandings, for example. They're going to be in similar environments to some pinnipeds that you're going to get on shore. And especially in the UK, for example, where you might have more than one species that's in the same area or rocky shores. I know there's been attempts to try and look at pinnipeds, and the success hasn't always been great, especially in species differentiation. So I think maybe for some species, especially some of the seal species in Antarctica, it's been good success. And maybe some of the work that I'm looking at in terms of the spectral resolution, maybe it could be useful, but again, when you're looking at the spectral aspects of things, you're looking at the multispectral image, which actually has a much coarser resolution than the panchromatic or the pan-sharpened image. And so getting pure pixels of information that can pull out and tease out some of that spectral information that might help us differentiate species probably won't happen for some pinniped species, especially once you start to go too small.
Yeah, I'll chime in. There's things even like with the same species. So like with beluga whales, for example, I'm looking at beluga whales in Cook Inlet, and Cook Inlet, as we call it, is marshmallows and chocolate milk. Like they're right below the surface, they're gone because it's such turbid water. Versus if you're looking at Somerset, up in Canada, where the waters are really, really, really clear, and you can see animals even below the surface. And so in terms of technology and things that need to be looked at in the future, there's availability bias and stuff like that. And what does that mean for satellites? Because there are certain bands where like you could see animals, more underwater if it's clear water, versus other places like Cook Inlet you wouldn't be able to. So there's got to be a bit of work in that area.
Just add another factor, I think, is how much time a species is spending on the surface of the water. This isn't even like an aerial survey where you're persistently in an area for a little bit of a period of time. This is really a snapshot. And so it's going to work better for species that tend to spend some time at the surface. I mean, I don't think we have any hope of detecting beaked whales with a satellite image, for example,
I also want to underscore the importance of marine mammal experts, even as we're looking for these semi-automated detection tools. I had mentioned the machine learning developers with whom we worked, both Ludwig and Eduardo. and they are machine learning developers. They eat, breathe, and sleep machine learning, and they will run through 1,000 iterations of machine learning models that mean nothing to most people. But they could not have actually done this work without working incredibly close collaboration with a whole bunch of actual marine mammal experts, most of whom sit at NOAA and many of whom are in the room and some I see on this call, because it is not obvious to a typical individual what a whale looks like from an aerial perspective. That is not a known piece of information. There are little clues that folks that are in those planes and that have done a lot of those boat-based surveys are aware of. So, humpback whales, you can see these bright kind of white pectoral fins, and that's a clear marker. With gray whales, they have a clear kind of signature look from an aerial perspective. But again, all of that validation was done with marine mammal experts. And I think we often think that these technology and tools are suddenly we're going to press go and it's all going to happen. And that is certainly not at the development phase of reality. And also it's not actually in like the practical use of the outputs a reality. Even the tool that we've developed, it requires an individual expert to go through and say, yes, that is a whale. No, that is not a whale. And I actually don't know. It's not a perfect image, so I can't tell. And that's just, we haven't like talked about that, but it's so critical in the development of these tools that it's bridging these different disciplines, but always fundamentally requiring the marine mammal experts to be in the room.
If I can jump in after that. So one aspect that we're trying to look at, we didn't report on today, was actually identifying individual dead baby walruses from space using synthetic aperture radar. And we were able to collect one image through one of the commercial small sat companies that has a longer collection time, and then they split up the image into 2 or 3 collections during the SAR overpass. And you can see some of these objects, most objects are just there, they're moving like a walrus, they don't move. But there was one object that was moving rapidly, and based on that, it's like, oh, as a marine mammal expert, I would say that's the polar bear that's causing the mayhem that's resulting in the trampolines and the dead baby walruses. And that was really interesting to bring in this whole new aspect of not just black and white SAR backscatter, but actual motion during the overpass. And there's at least 2 commercial outfits that are offering that now. So, and that's a dimension of the detection that we haven't considered before, but actual motion during the overpass can help you distinguish the species. Is that a walrus or a polar bear? And I can give you a link to an image that shows dead baby walruses from space with one that doesn't show motion. And just to give an idea, but it is similar to the stranding problems where you can easily detect them if you see them suddenly appear and then move around like carcasses do, which is not much, but it may be after storms they move.
Jason, do you mind if I jump in and add something?
No, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate the this idea about trying to understand what these models see, right? So we're talking about things from space, but really we're actually talking about how to we're also talking about how to actually use those data, right? Like, and it in almost all contexts, if we're going to be efficient, it's going to come down to machine learning. And I agree that 100% that the subject matter expert stuff is key to drive things. But I would also like to sort of plant the seed in people's minds that, especially and maybe especially so in the context of stock assessments, you also have to be able to explain what you're doing to your stakeholders. And I think if I was to put everybody on the spot right now and say, hey, how does your convolutional neural network actually work? Most people would have a really hard time explaining it to people. And if someone came up to you and said, hey, explain to me how you make, that was a detection of a whale, you'd probably say, I don't know, the model told me. And I think, in a stock assessment context where you're making high stakes decisions, we have a huge responsibility to make sure we work on explainability. And there's lots of great tools now to be able to do this. And I think this is something that the Marine Mammal Commission should be really kind of promoting is, the responsible use of AI requires explainability and interpretability. And they mean slightly different things. But there are lots of tools out there for us now to be able to do that. And so I'd really love to hear from the from the other folks that are working with these tools, what they think about this trust deficit that AI has, and how challenging that might be for the stock assessment process.
I'm gonna dive in with a slight dissenting opinion on that. Well, I agree in general with the value of explainable AI, and I think there's a big call for that, and there's a big push towards it, particularly in the science community, of course, because we're scientists and we want to know why things work and how do they work. But ultimately, if the tool accurately predicts whales and detects whales, even if you don't really understand how it works, could that not still be very valuable to you? Because sometimes the machine learning models that work best may not be the ones that are most explainable and interpretable. So I think it depends on what you're using those models for and what the reasons are and whether or not you really need to know the why. But I guess I would encourage us to maybe embrace this new era where maybe you don't know how it works. And I would also challenge us to think that maybe it's already that way right now. I fly aerial surveys a lot and I detect whales from the plane. Can I really explain to you how I know that was a right whale? Sometimes I can. Sometimes I can say I saw the velocity. Sometimes it's like, I don't know, something about the way it moved and the way the water shifted, or just, like I've seen them enough that I just know, but I can't always articulate that. And so I guess I'm not sure that the way the human brain works and the way we classify marine mammals according to species now traditionally by looking at them is even explainable. And so I guess I would encourage us to maybe be a little open-minded to the possibility that models that work, if we can confirm they work, maybe we don't need to know exactly how.
I want to push back against that, Kristen, as a veteran of a lot of take reduction teams where the information that goes into the stock assessment reports is really contested, right? Like how many right whales are there? Well, that right whales are different, but like, if we're talking about how many individuals there are in a population, which will determine what the PBR is, which will determine what the allowable takes are, that gets contested very, very quickly. And I think in a space where you or somebody in your agency has to defend that, if you can't say how, I think that's hard. And so I think this is a really good space to have this dialogue, right? I mean, because it would make me very uncomfortable to be at a take reduction team where I said, I don't know how that works.
Maybe just to clarify a little bit, I'm not talking about a total Wild West here. I mean, I am talking about models that are tested and ground truthed, and we have accuracy. There, I'm not talking about like, oh, we just take the word for the model, like not to that extent. I do think we need humans to be able to see the imagery and to feel confident in the detection of the species, at least at this stage. Like, for example, I think in the future, we maybe can get to a point with machine learning and artificial intelligence models of satellite detections where we might not be confident as a human looking at something that it's a whale, but the model is confident in the species based on, for example, spectral signatures or something like what Penny was talking about. I don't think we're there right now in terms of we need to be able to look at an image and feel confident it's a right whale and be able to test the model and say, okay, we know, for example, in this data set, there's 98 right whales. How many did the model find? How many false positives there were? How many, the recall and precision rates of the models? But that's like, how well does the model work? It doesn't necessarily mean that we need to understand all of the different convolutional layers of a neural network and how that path fully works. Like, I think that level of deep understanding is not necessary, even within the context of stock assessments. I think you just need a well-tested model tested on blind training data to get to that bar. And then in the future, I can see us moving into an era where we let go of even more control and say, for example, in the synthetic aperture imagery, I can't tell that you're a right whale, but based on all the things that led up to this point, we are pretty confident it's a right whale, just in the same way we trust other models. But
I'm going to just take us in a little bit of a related direction. I think it was really commendable in the talks that we saw today that everybody was producing online, freely available, usable workflows. And kind of a question for all of the panelists is it better to, at this point, continue to try to develop these models with independent groups to kind of maybe come up with the best competing model, or to sort of combine efforts and work together on models? And I'm thinking particularly of cetaceans, because it's going to be a completely different kind of thing for counting pinnipeds. But what do you all think? I mean, it's great that you're sharing your data and you can kind of test each other's models with your own data, your own imagery, or whatever. But I'm thinking about how the commission might be able to help, and is it best to continue independently but sharing, or try to converge on some kind of grand model?
I'm just going to pop in really quickly. So I brought up earlier about the International Whaling Commission Satellites to Study Whales group, and I mentioned one of the things about the group is that we're downstream, down the line, one of the aims is trying to coordinate the efforts to automate detection. I think right now the field is moving at such a speed that it does take individual groups to try and work towards this challenge, because it is a huge challenge. You need substantial amounts of data to get these models to work. Like I say, the speed at which these models are being developed and progressing is just so substantial that for one group or multiple groups to achieve the output at the end, I think it will, at this stage, take individual efforts, but that's what the group is there for, so that we can report these efforts together in the future-facing theory that we could maybe bring those together into one single common code that we could suggest as a best practice moving forward. And things like, what are the metrics out of those models, again, that we could use as a best practice to always deliver out the same representation of accuracy or the reliability of these models. But yeah, I think maybe other people can, add to that. But I think at this stage, working individually is not necessarily a bad thing, but I think coming together in the future, and that's why we have this group, I think it'll be really, really important.
I can chime in quickly as well. I think that the collaborative component is essential and the communication component is essential, but I do agree with Penny. I think there's a little bit of marching forward with individual models, and that's partly just because of the complexity of these things. So Kim's slides were brilliant at illustrating, just to get to a usable image, how much has to go into that, from the raw image that's taken into something that our eye can make sense of. But the reality is the thing that our eye makes sense of might be a little bit different than what a model performs best over. And that might be a little bit different for you might have one processing work stream that works really well for one species, but actually doesn't work as well for another species. And so we found in an ideal world, we'd have a perfect model that we could just turn the crank and it would work for a whole bunch of different species. But it just seems we're not at the stage yet with the available machine learning approaches to do that. And so we actually sacrificed a fair amount of performance in the model that is available on Whales AI, because it's a model that has multiple classes, but 2 individual whale classes. And that does not perform as well as a model that is just detecting gray whales, which actually we have a model that does that with 99.9% accuracy, and a model that just detects humpback whales, which are harder. So that's in the high 80s. But to combine them, you lose a little bit, because it's now not a perfect gray whale model and not a perfect humpback whale model. And so I think that there are also these work stream elements that are a little bit bespoke to the species that we're interested in, that's where we are now, and maybe eventually by doing these individual efforts, but in communication. I meet regularly with Kristen and Kim, and we would not be where we were with this effort were we not having that regular communication to understand what each other are doing. So I think that's essential to create these types of forums for discussion until we're at a point where we have some supermodels that can perform great over multiple species.
I think also maybe the better way to think about it, instead of like coming together for one model, is more bringing the training data together. I think the field of machine learning really moves so rapidly and is still in a period of incredible growth that, you know, almost by the time you've published a paper on a new model, it's out of date and there's a better model out there. So I think we want to see a lot of different people trying a lot of different models and a lot of different approaches. But being able to share that training data would be really valuable, because there are still to this day so very few detections of cetaceans from satellites. And, you know, each satellite is a little different too. So if you're talking each species and each sensor, our data set collectively globally is still tiny. And so it would be wonderful to be able to share as a global community. And there's been a lot of work along those lines, like Hannah Cubanes and Peter Fretwell published a British Antarctic survey data set on cetaceans, and we've tried to adapt the format of our tool to be able to export in that same format. But essentially, we're sharing the metadata at this time, which is not really ideal. I mean, I think what would be really valuable is a global data set of the actual satellite images. And our hands are really tied by the licensing restrictions. These satellite companies basically resell the same image multiple times to multiple people. And so even when you've purchased the image, it's, you know, yours to share with a limited group of people, and you can't publish it publicly and globally. So, you know, I think maybe this is something we could work on as a community, is a little push towards particularly these images where we do have confirmed detections of species of interest, pushing to be able to make that data truly public and truly shareable, because I think that's where the collaboration could be most valuable, not so much on the model development, but on the data set sharing. So we have so far gotten permission to share like 5 images of marine mammals publicly, but most of our data we're only allowed to share within the US government. And so we continue to advocate for and push on this, but I think this is something that if we all collectively pushed for truly public shared data sets, that would be like a great use of our collective effort.
Yeah, and
Okay.
go ahead. Do you want to go?
Just want to put in a plug for Umbra, and that they've been really kind to say, sure, want your data public, they'll push it out. Okay.
Yeah, I'll just basically affirm that I think at this stage, I think exactly what Penny and Darcy were saying, is that the more, I mean, it usually is a bad thing when you say more cooks in the kitchen, but I think in this case, more cooks in the kitchen is really welcomed. And I think everybody in this satellite community, it's pretty small, and we've done a pretty great job keeping in touch and talking and moving things forward. And like the, you know, stuff TNC has been working on, that's been great. And, you know, we hope that, you know, they have some really great models, like she was saying, and that, you know, once they're done publishing on that, then we're hoping to, like, you know, help and like use the open source and provide it, you know, as a tool. So like we all talk really regularly, and I think that's really helpful. And I think it's right now too, there's just so many ways to do the detections. Like, you know, when we were going back and forth on product level, like we also decided to go with the 1B, because we could have the spectral and the panchromatic, because some people only do detections just on the, you know, on the pan sharpened image, and you lose the spectral, it changes spectral stuff. And so you can use the multispectral image to do detections in itself. So it's, you know, a lot of different tools and methods to do these things. And I think the more we have people working on it, the more we can kind of come together as a community. And, you know, from as many different things I've worked on, I would say that, you know, the satellite community has been really open and sharing. And so I think we'll get there eventually.
Okay, I'm going to take a question first from Robert, because he's been itching to ask one.
Thanks, Jason, and thanks everybody for your presentations today and discussion. And Kim, especially thank you for the way you just said things. That as we were talking about models, I was kind of a little bit lost in what modeling we're talking about, because there's lots of different models. There's a conceptual model that Dave just talked about. There's the models that Rebecca develops for doing the statistical analyses. And so the way you said it, Kim, is like we're trying to better understand how we can get detections of different cetaceans. So really what I wanted to go back to, though, was something that Andy asked about, and cetaceans and satellites. That, of course, this session is about how we're using satellites to better inform stock assessment reports. And so when I think about the real data, the data that make a difference in stock assessment reports are pretty straightforward, and they aren't very complicated. To get them is a different story, but really we need an N-min, and we need, human mortality. Human-caused mortality are the big issues for stock assessment reports. And so, Dave, as you pointed out in your introductory discussion, that Tony and Rebecca's presentation about walruses and about using satellites and telemetry to better come up with a population estimate for walruses does that. It helps improve stock assessment reports. So Andy's question is like, where are we in using satellites to get a better understanding of cetacean populations? And because we're still way back on trying to figure out how to detect marine mammals, how to detect cetaceans, it seems like we're a long, long ways away from that. And then, Kristen, you just said about the issue of satellite images not being shareable, not being available to very many people, means that transparency is really, really low if we ever get to the point where we're trying to use satellites to count cetaceans and come up with population estimates. So my question is really, what do you all think in terms of using satellites for assessing population status of cetaceans? How far are we? Kim, you've obviously talked about Cook Inlet belugas. That's an obvious one. But for other cetaceans that are broadly distributed, that would be super expensive to get satellite images across the range of whatever stock or species it is going to be really expensive. And in part, I ask that question because in some of the recently proposed amendments to the MMPA, they have said there has been concern that N-min estimates shouldn't be used for calculating a PBR because we need to take into account the entire population. And so it seems like that issue, that concern that's out there, whether it ever gets into the MMPA or not, that issue is a concern. And so that makes it even more difficult for using satellite, in my opinion, for using satellites to count cetaceans. So sorry, a little long-winded question, but I'd really like to know your opinions about how far away we are from using satellites for cetaceans.
I'm gonna try to not become bitter, but no, I'm just kidding. No,
don't take it out on me.
I know. No, I mean, I think it's a really valid question, and it's something that comes up a lot. And I'm not sure the best way to say this, but I think right now we're just in a place where there is sort of a monopoly, if you will, on satellite data. And there is things that are a little bit, I guess maybe I know the right people, but, at least I can talk about for being government where we can, in theory, access all the satellite imagery. But the negotiations that go through and what, for example, government can access or has, the contracts, that's not something that any of us are at the table for. And however that gets negotiated has changed over time. And so I will say, as an example, there are better ways to get satellite imagery. So for example, when I was looking for bowhead whale imagery and talking about, because we were doing this huge 3-plane survey, it'd be really great to get the satellites to take at the same time, and I talked to Maxar and things like that, and certainly it would be about, several $1 million, but you can literally, they have the ability to hook you up with, within 12 hours of getting an image of that area, assuming it's cloud-free and things like that. And they have, Legion, some of the Legion satellites have launched, which is Worldview 3, 30 centimeter, and it's multiple, and some of them are polar orbiting, for example. So you can get images a lot more regular than they used to, but it's not part of the negotiated contract. We don't have access to that without paying money that we don't have. And so I think so much of this is license restrictions and money. It's like, in a perfect world, somebody would be building the satellites that we need to do this. And I think it is possible, but not currently within the realm of what's available to us.
Sorry, what? Penny, okay, sorry. Go ahead, Penny.
Kristen, you're welcome to jump in if you were going to go with something just then, and I can go after you.
Yeah, mine was relevant to Kim, so maybe I'll just fill in a little more details about the satellite contracts to just help folks understand where we're coming from. So Kim and I are in sort of a unique position at NOAA Fisheries as part of the U.S. government, where we're actually accessing these contracts negotiated by the Department of Defense and made available for civilian science applications through the Civil Applications Committee. So we don't pay a programmatic cost per image. The images, they're sort of free to us. They're not free because they're part of some multi-billion-dollar contract, but we don't have to pay per image to task over whales. Those images for us, we have permission to share within the U.S. government. So there is the level of transparency, to Robert's point, of we could share with anyone within, NOAA Fisheries or USGS or the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management and stuff like that. But it's a little bit more challenging for us to share outside of the U.S. government. So I'll stop there and let Penny hop on.
Thanks, Kristen. Sorry, Robert, because this isn't going to address specifically stock assessment elements of this, but it's going to expand on what Kim and Kristen have already said. And I've wrote some points down so I don't forget what I wanted to say. But in terms of this, access to imagery and reducing costs individually or as collaborators or research institutes, we can do things such as, for example, asking questions like, what's the minimum resolution that we need to answer the questions that we're trying to answer? That reduces costs. The feasibility assessment, the pipeline I've put in place, again, that's a way to reduce wasted expenditure that we don't need to be doing by not investing in imagery that was not useful in the first place. In terms of going back to the IWC Satellites to Study Whales group, some of the things that Kristen brought up earlier about the license agreements and things like this. One of the things that we were doing together as a group was so I'll just go back to the very first workshop we had, actually. We had a panel discussion where three of the, I would say, the top competing satellite image providers came to that panel discussion, and we had an opportunity to discuss with them some of these challenges around image accessibility and data sharing. And one of the recommendations that came from that was part of the IWC report is that we would write a letter to satellite image providers to start to break down and discuss some of these challenges to get their support and get them on board. So that's still in place and underway. And then there are third-party initiatives. So, for example, someone like myself or other users outside of the US, we don't have these agreements where we can access free imagery, but there's third-party agreements with ESA, and they allow you access to things like worldview imagery, where you can propose projects and get certain quotas worth of imagery for free. So there are initiatives that can help different users and different groups. And then other discussions that we've had as a collective at some of the IWC group meetings is maybe we can work together. Maybe it's quite dream world, but I think given the funding and how scalability of how expenditure is coming down, but maybe there's a possibility that we could build a purpose-built satellite that's used like user to our community, we could put a proposal in to a funding bid. Maybe that is a possibility in the future, maybe not right now. And then the final thing, and then Hannah's on here somewhere, so maybe she wants to jump in, but things like Maxar have got a platform now called MGP Pro, and this allows a user an ability to look at imagery without ever actually buying it at the resolution that you would see natively, because right now you can't see an image before you buy it, and then you get it and you're like, well, it's absolutely useless and I've just spent £2,000 on this thing. So this is like a quite a cool way to also get a look at some imagery. But yeah, Hannah is here if she wants to jump in and tell you more about that, or the IWC group, or accessibility that I might have missed.
Thanks, Penny. Yeah, about, I guess, the cost and how to reduce it. We are now switching to MGP Pro for the Walrus from Space project. We were trying to acquire imagery for like very high resolution imagery for all the non-hollouts for the Atlantic. I was going to say species, excluding the population in Russia. Initially, we're going with the crowdsourcing. Maxar has this crowdsourcing platform, GeoHive, and it dropped the price massively. But it's not, from my experience, it's not great. It might be fine for the detection, but the crowd is not engaging as much with detecting because they don't find a lot of imagery with walrus. So I understand they get bored. They do enjoy the counting, but from some of the stuff I've looked at, I'm like, this is not great. So we're now switching to MGB Pro. And because with the Walrus project, it was kind of weird. We didn't task and pay for the imagery, but we gave a list of areas of interest we wanted imagery captured. And so they captured lots of imagery during the time frame we gave them. So there's huge archives for the areas we're interested for the Atlantic walrus. And now I can just go on the MGB Pro and check this imagery at full resolution. I mean, you have to pay a subscription and it depends on how many you load, but I'm now trying to find a way that I don't use too many credits until I need to figure out if there's a walrus or not. So we'll see how that works out. I just started it last week. So MGB Pro might be a solution, but to be seen.
Yeah, I'm going to chime in really quick on MGPD Pro. Like, that's something that we have looked into too, and that's what I was talking about. You could use that same platform to actually task within like 12 hours. And it's come a long ways, especially being able to, they're downloading and stuff like that. But one thing I wanted to point out that, in case people don't know, is that there's a really big difference if you're tasking or getting imagery through like what we can access through the contract versus if you're commercial side of stuff. So if you're a commercial agency willing to pay, or like, for example, when, I just got a cost estimate for the bowhead whale stuff, the amount, the timing, the frequency, all that stuff, it's drastically different than like what we can task like through the current contract that we have through the government. So there are things that are available to us that we just can't access because we don't have that kind of money that the commercial side does. So there's it's not to say that it's 100% there, but it's a lot more there than what we can access.
I would also love to put that question to the stock assessment scientists in the room, because I do think that it does strike me that stock assessment is a challenging application, and min is a simple metric, but getting it is not a simple feat. And I think the types of applications where we're currently using whale detection systems require much less highly resolved information. So a vessel speed reduction program, you need to know when endangered species show up and when they leave an area. We can definitely use satellite detection models to do that. Similarly, for whale entanglements, that is focusing on, it uses like a trigger system. So if the number of whales in a certain area is above a given threshold, it triggers a management action. We can definitely use the whale models to look at that in those areas at those times of interest. Getting to a whole population level metric does require a lot of steps. And so I think it's something where we see promise, and that you can survey, of course, much larger ocean areas that are out of reach to a lot of surveys. You can do so any time of year, not just at set survey times. And so that feels, again, like an important source of information to augment all of those existing surveys. It's not going to replace them, but it does provide additional information. And so I think I would love to hear from the stock assessment scientists on how, where there is promise to use additional data sets to try to inform some of those gaps that might exist in the current approaches.
I think also it would be helpful to say this to this group as well, that there's, you know, in my experience, Jason's curve actually reminded me of just how people tend to view the idea of satellite detection for whales, right? You know, there's the sort of unrealistic expectations contingent and the totally disillusioned, this is a waste of time and money contingent. And the reality really lies in between. So satellite imagery is very promising, particularly for areas that are hard to reach offshore, places where it's hard to get a boat or a plane, for example. It's a really valuable tool. But it's not actually easy for us to just, you know, image the entire Atlantic Ocean simultaneously, or to say, oh, let's go back in time and understand what's been happening in this area the past 12 years. That is a huge misconception, that there just exists archival imagery over the oceans. So most of the oceans don't ever get imaged unless someone like one of us is specifically requesting that an image be taken over an area of ocean. Sometimes you may get lucky in certain interesting coastal areas near shore, like off the coast of Hawaii or New York or something. There may have been some other reason for a commercial interest to photograph that area. But generally, when you look in the archives, you're not going to find imagery over a whale habitat there. So the imagery typically needs to be tasked specifically for the use case that you're interested in. And there's really some pretty heavy geographic limitations. You know, this imagery that sort of captures the whole globe daily is very coarse resolution. We need really fine resolution, like 50 centimeter or better imagery in order to do whale detection. And that's only possible in like pretty small little bits. So and that's going to change and improve over time, but that's a major limitation right now. Like we can't really just do like an AMAPS-like survey of the full coast over the course of a month in the way that you could with a boat. So that's something else to keep in mind as we think about stock assessments, is just like realistic scope of geographic area.
Okay, Peter, and then Brady, if there are some online questions. We've got about 7.5 minutes left, so let's try to get some more questions from folks.
Before Peter goes, I just want to let all the folks with mics, not you four in the front, that it seems like there might be a hot mic by us on the commission, so make sure that your light isn't green, but Peter's is, because he's about to talk, and now I'm done.
No, this might be a very quick question to you, Kristen. What drives the push toward greater resolution? You said it's going to get better, but it's not whale detection that's driving that, is it?
No, definitely not. You know, to a certain extent, we're working with like 10-year-old instruments. We're working primarily on Maxar Worldview 2 and 3, which are not new, and there's only 2 of them. So the next generation of, for example, Maxar Legion satellites is coming online, and now instead of launching one satellite, these companies are launching like a whole constellation of satellites. And so the technology is improving, like the technology on board the satellites is improving. Resolution is coming down. There also was previously some restrictions on how high resolution the satellite was authorized to be in terms of from like a Department of Defense perspective. They just authorized the creation of an albedo commercially available satellite at 10 centimeter resolution. So the world is just changing. There's all these hyperspectral sensors coming online. So, you know, maybe it will be possible to image the oceans at the scale and resolution that we want in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. But today, there are temporal and spatial limitations.
Okay, Daniel, I think you have a question.
Thank you. Yeah, I think in that slope of enlightenment part of the curve that Dave showed us, one of the things that I feel that in the area of stock assessment, we still need to cover is the, well, Penny gave us a tantalizing view of what this could look like in terms of the feasibility in actually looking at large areas and what areas on a world map are actually best suited for this kind of work. Kristen was making the point about how satellite imagery is especially useful in open ocean remote areas, but yet a lot of the examples that we have actually seen are being targeted because they are in very coastal areas where we are able to do a really good validation work. And this is not to in any way diminish that work because it's fabulous, but I think along with that, we need a global map. And again, Penny gave us a couple of views of that, showing at the areas, at the tropics, for instance, that for strandings mapping, for example, would be best suited for this kind of work. But also looking at open ocean areas for counting live whales. There is a set of characteristics that constrain which of those areas are, but we don't have that view yet. I'm looking here at a paper called Global Coverage of Cetacean Line Transect Surveys, Status Quo, Data Gaps, and Future Challenges by Kristen Kashner and others from 2012. I'm thinking if things like that are necessary in terms of being able to actually circle out what parts of the ocean are best suited for this work as a step toward being able to really direct the technology to where we can really focus for population level questions for stock assessments.
Yeah, go ahead, Penny.
Thank you, Jason, and thanks, Daniel, for the question, or the discussion more so as well. Yeah, so the feasibility framework that I've got actually can assess anywhere on the globe, and it can do so for live cetaceans, so it can look at both cloud and wind thresholds and identify those suitable areas. And when the paper comes out, it's gone through review, so it shouldn't be too long, that it will be completely openly accessible and available. And all you have to do is download the climate data for your area of interest, put it into this framework, and it can give you an output of those feasibility maps. Something to mention is the climate data that's used is it's assimilated data, so it uses both observed data from a multitude of different things, from weather balloons, ground stations, you name it, and then modeled data, and it puts that together. Based on that, the observed data in the open ocean is not that great for weather conditions, so there will be limitations in how accurate those feasibility assessments are, but this is something that maybe studies can do, is take these feasibility maps and then actually give some sort of interpretation of actually was that feasibility map any use, down the line. But the principle is it's there to be able to do that, and hopefully it'll be useful to different communities.
Thanks. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to echo what Danielle was saying. I think, even working with drones, we're not in a post-validation world, right? We still have to justify that that we know what we're detecting, and there are very few examples where you have, an actual person on the water seeing a whale and having a satellite detection at the same time, and agreed that you don't need to be able to explain everything in a model to people, but we do have to be able to show that we're making connections between the real world and what these things are doing. And so it's going to, the toughest thing for stock assessment purposes is that when you switch methods, you have to make sure that the changes that you might detect aren't related to the methodology, right? And so this cal-val part is a critical component that we really haven't even started to tackle yet, or if we have, it's very, very slow going because it's so hard to link those connections, right, between satellites and other accepted modalities of sensing these animals.
Brady, you have a question online?
Yeah, there's been a total of 2 questions online. One was already answered, and I might actually ask Darcy to sort of paraphrase the question and your answer. as opposed to me just reading it word for word. The other questions asked, I think, is quick, and I'll try to answer it, and then the panelists can tell me yes or no. So the question was, what is the smallest marine mammal you believe you could use the various technologies to identify any chance for sea otters? And I'm guessing that the answer is no, because it was elephant seals, walrus, or pilot whales. Nods if I was sort of right, or can you do smaller? Yeah, we got an answer.
In short, I think the answer to those questions is really unknown. My mantra right now is anything bigger than a minke whale, but we're also trying to detect Hawaiian monk seals because Jason talked us into it, so.
Yeah, I will say that's probably also pretty challenging, but it really just depend on how contrast it would be with the background. I mean, they do look at, I mean, there's been work on albatross, on, white albatross on Greenland, and they've done quite a bit of work at penguins and stuff. So I think the main challenge would be in the water kind of thing, the contrast.
Okay, awesome. So Darcy, would you mind paraphrasing Mike's question and your answer?
Sure, no problem. So Michael Weiss had a question about if the performance that I was reporting of the detection algorithm was essentially if it was using the training data, so that data set that is saying, I know these are whales, I identified them manually, or I validated them manually, if it was just using one data set that was trained and then tested on the same data set, or if it was the kind of best practice in machine learning is to separate them. So you have a training data set and then you put it to the side and you don't look at it. And then you test your model and then you compare between the data sets to see how well it actually did at predicting those things. And so it was the latter. So it was using that kind of best practice. And then I just reported some of the performance metrics, and I would just encourage, I think I'd mentioned them in the presentation. So it's 84% recall for humpbacks and 95 for gray whales. And if anyone is interested, the documentation of the model on Whales AI is on Whales AI. There's a whole user guide that goes into way more detail than I could here. So if folks are interested, you can check that out and then reach out to us with follow-up questions.
Okay, Francis.
I was interested, Penny, in the obviously in strandings and so the concept of using satellite imagery to detect strandings in areas that are inaccessible. And I'm ignorant, so I'm assuming that when you're training or looking at these images, you talked about using the spectral imaging or the panchromatic, but stranded whales have like different color, shape, temperature than live whales. So I'm just curious about how you extrapolate from something that you've trained up on a live whale with whatever sensor it is to a dead whale that's really pretty different.
Thank you so much for the question. So as I kind of suggested it in my presentation, where we're at with the stranded cetacean stuff is much earlier in the process than where we're at with the live cetacean stuff in the community, because there's only really been one published paper that's come out. In terms of you're absolutely right, they change shape, size, and color. And for us to take a live cetacean trained model and then try and use that to look at, say, dead cetaceans, right now it probably wouldn't work because the models aren't generalizable, as was mentioned earlier with Darcy's work. It doesn't. The model can work for one species, but it can't work for another. So it's took a huge amount of time to build up a data set that's substantial enough to even try and train a model to detect stranded cetaceans. I've got a number of images now from different satellite sensors. I've prioritized if we can get cetaceans at different stages of decomposition. I've defined those phases of decomposition and based on, we can't use similar metrics to what you would on the ground because we don't have internal information from a satellite. So we've had to try and shape those slightly differently with stranding experts involved in that discussion. And these are data that we're trying to pull out to create a big enough data set to try and apply this. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge at this stage, even on a human level detection, trying to say if we can see a whale that's fresh dead, in active decomposition compared to something that's in dry remains, is that even possible? And that's something we're trying to eke out. And then also those spectral signatures where I'm taking those samples from the ground. I've revisited the same whale over time to see if those signatures are different, and if we do see changes, that's spectrally different, and whether we would be able to see those same representations from space to try and use that as a proxy for detection, but also a stage of decomposition. I don't know if that answered your question, but hopefully it gave some information.
Thanks, Penny. And I'm afraid that we're out of time, a little bit over time, but it's been a really fascinating discussion. And I think we obviously haven't come to any big resolutions, except for that I feel like these are really hard questions. There's still a lot of, or really hard problems, and there's still a long way to go. But I want to thank all the speakers for enlightening us today, and also for really tilting at windmills and trying to resolve these problems. It's going to take folks like you really pushing the envelope and trying to resolve these hard problems faced where you've got, barriers to even getting the imagery, and then once you have the imagery, being able to make detections, and then assigning probabilities to that, and then developing analytical methods to automate it, and all of that. So many, many thanks from me and the rest of the commission for your efforts, and we look forward to hearing more from you in the future.
Yeah, we now have closing, session wrap up on the agenda. And so it can sort of be live from, commission, et cetera, or if panelists want to close your remark, we've got essentially 10 minutes before the meeting closes. I don't know that we've planned a formal session closing summary, obviously. Yeah, I mean, yeah. All right, so for those online, Peter's going to step up to a mic in just a second. Any of them. You can stay in your seat if you'd like.
Yeah, again, thanks to all the panelists, and for those of you in the UK or elsewhere, I hope you get a good night's sleep, and those on the East Coast as well. I realize we're actually dipping into the evening in the East Coast, and Tony, you get to stay up a lot longer than we do, so it's great to see you all. I think as a wrap-up, we really had great expectations for this session, and I think you fulfilled them. It's a fascinating area, and really the range of things that people are doing is remarkable, and also really interesting on the stock assessment question. Where are we getting with pinnipeds? Sea otters, we got sea otters in there, cetaceans. No one mentioned sirenians, which may be a problem. In any case, we're going to adjourn today just to give people a preview of tomorrow. Our agenda is online, but tomorrow morning, Randy Wells is going to help us start a session on reducing impact through innovation, innovative and less invasive sampling methods for health and population assessment. And this really follows on a lot of the relation between stock assessment and health assessment, which we've been focused on at the commission now for some years, with our chair being a health person, our science director being really interested in marine mammal health, and many of our staff engaged in marine mammal health related work. So we'll get remote tag deployment from Randy. We'll get suction cup tags. I shouldn't do this, but anyway, you can look at the agenda to see. And then in the afternoon, we're going to get more into the connecting the dots theme with all these technologies. How do we actually use them to get out to assess populations? So innovative and integrative quantitative methods for assessing populations. Aaron Thode will, I guess he had to step out, he will lead the session, and we're really looking forward to that one really bringing us down to the end of the day. And then on Thursday, we'll go to hot topics in the California ecosystem. I won't go through those now, but we're really looking forward to the next 2 days. So with that, thanks a lot. It took a lot of work to get this meeting in place, thanks to the staff and thanks to the scientific advisors and commissioners for coming out to this wonderful venue. When we all get, those of you in the screen, we all get to go outside in La Jolla, California right now, which is really a treat. So thanks everybody and have a great evening.